Hello and welcome to the EcoCast by Actual Tech Media. Today's topic, from the data center to the cloud, optimizing and monitoring IT infrastructure. Thank you so much for joining us on today's EcoCast. On this event, you'll hear from our experts at Turbonomic, Scale Computing, Rubrik, Gigamon, NetApp, and Logs.io. We've got some of the most innovative technology solutions lined up for today's EcoCast. After all, the infrastructure that you're monitoring has become more expansive than ever before. There's elements in the data center, others in the private cloud, others in the public cloud, and then even SaaS applications. And what you need most are tools to help you optimize and monitor all that infrastructure and associated applications in as unified a fashion as possible. And those are exactly the types of solutions that you'll be learning about on today's EcoCast. Not only monitoring and optimizing, but also protecting, storing, and gaining greater efficiency across the entire IT organization. Now, before we get started, there's a few things that you should know about the event. Of course, we've got some awesome prizes lined up for you on the EcoCast today. I'll be talking about those here in just a moment, as well as the eligibility requirements for the prize drawings. But first, I want to call your attention there to the questions pane of your audience console. That's where we encourage you to ask questions about today's topics. Of course, we welcome everyone out there saying hello and greetings from across the United States and around the world, but we also want your technical questions for our live Q&A sessions that will be running on the EcoCast today. We even have best question prizes to help further encourage those questions, and we'll talk about that more here in just a moment. But first, we encourage this to be a social event. You can socialize the event right there from your audience console using the Twitter icon, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically appended. I also want to call your attention there to the Handouts tab. It's there that you can download resources such as free evaluation or trial links, solution briefs, ebooks, case studies, white papers, and more. So make sure that you check out the Handouts tab of your audience console. The prizes on the EcoCast today are 3 Amazon $500 gift cards, and of course you must be live in attendance to qualify for the prize drawings and also meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions that you can find there in your Handouts tab. In addition to the 3 Amazon $500 gift cards, we also have Amazon $50 gift cards, one for each of our Q&A sessions on the EcoCast today. The prize winners will be selected based on those who ask questions and meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. We will contact the prize winners via email after the event. All grand prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and you always have an option to make a donation to our selected charities that you see here on the screen. Over the years, we've donated thousands of dollars to charities, and if you win a prize and you'd like to help someone less fortunate, we would love to help you do that. The hashtag for today's EcoCast is ATM EcoCast, and like I said, if you tweet using the Twitter icon of your audience console, that hashtag will be automatically appended. You can always follow Actual Tech Media on Twitter, and me, today's host, David M. Davis. I'll be handing it off to fellow moderator, Mr. Scott Becker, after our keynote presentation. I also encourage you to follow Actual Tech Media on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. And finally, I want to encourage you to check out the Gorilla Guide Book Club. This is where you can download free, easy-to-read enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts. It's a great way to stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. Yes, these books work on your Kindle or mobile device, and they are all completely free. You can download them at gorilla.guide, and you'll find a link to that there in the Handouts tab. And with that, it's now my pleasure to introduce you to and welcome back today's keynote presenter, someone you may have seen on past EcoCast events, but his presentations are just so fantastic and so educational. We always encourage him to come back and join us, and that is Mr. Ned Bellevance. Ned, it's great to have you back. Take it away.
Hey everyone, I'm Ned Bellevance, and today I wanted to chat about 3 reasons you will never be 100% public cloud. Now, before I dig into those 3 reasons, first, I'd like to set the stage. If you believe the hype train from the mid 2010s, Every organization was moving all of their assets to the public cloud, and if you weren't doing so, you were a decided dinosaur. Seriously, we started calling all non-cloud apps legacy applications, which heavily implied that they were inferior to the whiz-bang, 12-factor, cloud-native apps of the future. Sometimes I feel like the mantra changed to, if it ain't broke, break it quickly and often. Well, it turns out those legacy applications were the ones responsible for generating revenue. And here we are several years later, still running those legacy apps in our on-premises data centers and wondering if we should have migrated them using one of the 5 or 6 R's from Gartner. The other big trend during this period was digital transformation. And the pandemic only served to accelerate the need for businesses to add a digital component to their existing services. The default assumption was that digital transformation would force the legacy fossils to finally adopt the public cloud. Taking a look at the latest Flexera State of the Cloud report for 2022, while cloud adoption continues to rise, 80% of respondents are planning to take a hybrid cloud approach. That means some portion of their applications are staying on premises. Let's dig into 3 reasons you're likely in the same bucket as 80% of organizations out there. You can't fight physics. I mean, you can, but you're probably going to lose. There are always going to be some applications in your organization that are latency sensitive. Moving your service to the public cloud can introduce unacceptable latency for clients consuming it. There's 2 buckets that I like to put latency into. There's proximity to end users or proximity to physical devices. End users can be concentrated in a static location like a branch office, or as we increasingly saw in the pandemic, distributed across a wide area. Applications that are latency sensitive may require the application to reside in the same location as users or have a point of presence that's just a few milliseconds away from the end users. In either case, the solution is probably not the public cloud. Instead, you are looking at a hosted data center or working with an edge provider to get the proximity your application needs. Proximity to physical devices is prevalent in manufacturing and similar industries that may have instrumentation requiring time-sensitive decision-making. An application responsible for unlocking doors or halting a conveyor belt needs to remain close to the devices it controls. You simply cannot make light travel faster. One of the big promises of the public cloud was a lowered total cost of ownership, or TCO. Now, you might have noticed over the last 5 years or so, the messaging around TCO has either shifted or disappeared entirely. And that's because companies that did a lift and shift migration to the public cloud found that they weren't actually saving money. There's myriad reasons why, and there's not nearly enough time to cover it all here, but there are a few main points I can touch on. First, applications that are not dynamic or cloud native couldn't take advantage of cloud economics, like scaling to meet demand or leveraging serverless pricing models. The operations team handling the existing on-prem gear had to be expanded to handle the cloud. Increased headcount led to increased costs. And finally, application teams scaled out their development environments to take advantage of virtually limitless capacity in the public cloud. Now, that's not to say you can't save money in the cloud, but it requires diligence, discipline, and vigilance. It's far too easy to end up with a horrifying bill because Freddie left a fleet of GPU-enabled VMs on for a month. We must also consider that there will be steady-state applications that are well understood by your IT ops team and will always be cheaper to run on premises. A16Z ran an article that talked about the cost of cloud, and they observed a break-even point where the economies of scale tipped in favor of an on-prem solution. For applications that are core to your business, on-premises might be the most economical place to run them. The third and final reason is the rise of regulations regarding data sovereignty and stewardship. While the public cloud is built on the idea of a shared responsibility model, that model makes it pretty explicit that anything above the physical layer is your problem. If you are the steward of your company's data, you may find that keeping things on premises is less of a headache when auditors are involved. Now, especially for international companies, having to comply with the regulations of every country you do business in may require a different approach for countries that don't have a major public cloud provider presence. You're either going to have to build out a data center of your own or rent rack space from a local provider. While you might never be 100% public cloud, I would encourage you to go 100% cloud. Confused? What I mean is that cloud as an operational model has benefits regardless of the location. It's the move from sysadmin to SRE. It's embracing automation and service level objectives in all the aspects of the software delivery lifecycle. It's making informed decisions over where an application should be placed, while still using a common set of tools for development and deployment. As your organization continues to evolve and mature, I'd recommend focusing on adopting solutions, processes, and tools that play well with a multi-cloud and hybrid cloud environment, because ultimately, that's your world for the foreseeable future. Thanks so much for your time today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the cloudy future looks like for you. You can find me on Twitter at Ned1313 or on my website, nedinthecloud.com. Until next time, stay healthy, stay safe out there. Bye for now.
All right, thanks to Ned for that keynote. And as David mentioned earlier, this is Scott Becker. I'll be moderating the EcoCast today. We're going to get started with our first poll of the day, which you can see up on your screen. We're wondering what your time frame is for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company. And the options there are, under 6 months, 6 to 12 months, 1 to 2 years, or not sure. So we'll just leave that up there for a second. We can see the answers flooding in. Not sure seems to be, the leader at the moment, but 6 to 12 months is also pretty popular. I'll just give everybody another few seconds on that poll, and then we'll get rolling with our presentations. Okay, thanks to everybody who responded. We really appreciate it. And now it's time for our first presentation in the From the Data Center to the Cloud EcoCast, and our first session comes from Turbonomic. Presenting for Turbonomic is Tom Murphy, Chief Marketing Officer, and Asena Hertz, Senior Director of Product Marketing. So Tom and Asena, welcome. Thanks for being here today. And Asena, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Hi, folks. Thank you for joining us today. I think we'll dive right into it. We are absolutely going to be talking about data center and cloud optimization, but we wanted to present this through the lens of its impact on sustainability, seeing as that we've got a number of customers that have been expressing their, that this is important to them. So just a couple of slides, we'll get into that, and then the cloud and data center specifics. So with that, we wanted to share some market data. I'm going to hand it over to Tom, who's going to kick things off.
Thanks, Asena. One of the things that we look at, even as an individual, when you look at companies, whether you're looking at them from their profile, their performance, we've always looked at, obviously, the financial records or the financial progress of the company. As we go forward, more and more, let's say, assessments of the performance of a company will also be looked at from things like the security profile of the company, but in addition, the environmental posture of the company, according to McKinsey. So when we think about the changing landscape of how people and organizations, and even investors reflect on companies, that role of sustainability or environmentally friendly is something that will play a role, again, looking at the performance of the companies. When we actually take that a step further, we've also done some I'm trying to advance the slide here. Let's go to next. We've done some research, and Gartner's done some research on this topic. So when we think about sustainability, and that's our focus for today, and obviously how we can get started, one of the things that Gartner is citing is when you think about sustainability, there's kind of obvious things that come into play, but what isn't so obvious is the role of a CIO. And CIOs do play an important role, according to Gartner. And just to give you a bit of a foreshadow as to how, we're going to talk about today, when we think about cloud and the deployment allocation in cloud, many organizations tend to be over-provisioned, and they over-provision to minimize the risk of performance issues in many cases. They don't know what to expect. They don't know what they need. So in many cases, they'll buy more than they need to assure the performance of applications, or try to. The second thing is, that's not just in the cloud. Having run data centers for many years, we used to have many different machines, many servers, and in many cases, it was very difficult to drive up utilization to 75, 80%. And in fact, our data supports that organizations tend to run around 20% utilization on average overall. So when you combine these things together, it's important for, obviously, the reflection of the company. CIOs play an important role, and two areas to focus on to bridge this is the idea of, okay, if you go to the cloud, you're probably over-provisioned. If you're on-prem, maybe you're not utilizing what you purchased as much as you could. So we're going to try to take you through a process to help you get started. So I'm going to hand it back to Asena to give us some insights on really just what are some of the next steps we can take a look at.
When we're talking about appropriately allocating resources to applications, whether they run in the cloud or the data center, we just wanted to kind of provide the context here. So there's these two use cases. In the cloud, there's a partnership going on, and you'll hear this concept of sustainability in the cloud versus sustainability of the cloud. That's AWS saying that, but it applies to all of the major cloud providers. And really the story here is that sustainability in the cloud is in reference to how effectively are you using those cloud resources to support your applications, whereas sustainability of the cloud is the responsibility of the cloud providers, and that's how effectively are they managing the users on those applications, and then they're also managing the sources of energy, right? So investing in renewables, investing in technologies like better heating and cooling for servers and the like. So there's a lot of efficiencies that cloud providers or sustainability efficiencies that cloud providers offer inherently, but at the end of the day, the responsibility of operating sustainably in the cloud is your responsibility as a customer, and that allows then the cloud provider to reallocate or allocate what you might have otherwise used to more customers, and everyone sees those efficiency gains, those reduction in environmental impact. The data center, more straightforward here, right? If you are managing your data center and you are appropriately allocating your resources to your workloads, to your applications, you can run more applications on fewer hosts. Fewer hosts is less energy to power those hosts. And then, of course, there's other decisions that might be in your purview as far as the cleanness of the energy that's powering those data centers. But we just wanted to note, right, that there's optimization is a piece of this larger picture that I'm sure you're increasingly becoming aware of. But the thing that we see with our customers, right, is this is a major challenge. So Tom, back over to you. What's happening today with these applications that's making this so hard?
Yeah, applications, what they've done is for agility, portability, we've built many layers and modules within applications. In many cases, those run across different platforms, different server types, different, obviously, cloud, non-cloud, or on-prem. And ultimately, with these architectures, it's created just complexity that is incredibly difficult for individuals to manage as a whole looking at the application. So what that has also done is, if we take a look at the profile of the stack, from top to bottom here, you'll see things deployed like application performance management. We'll see cloud, container technologies, virtualization, on top of physical or public cloud, all the way down to different network topologies as well. The approach that we've taken historically has been this kind of break-fix model where individuals at each of those layers have a tool and a database of information, in many cases events, where they see something, they react, and what they do is they'll respond in the best way known to that layer of the application stack. And in reality, what that's doing is it's isolating an issue, but it doesn't have context of the application. And it's very, very difficult, obviously, to manage application performance or ultimately end-user experience if all you're doing is looking at a slice of that. So one of the things that we want to actually think about when we think about management and the applications is, how do we not just look at assuring the performance or minimizing the cost? One of the things we say to our customers is it's pretty easy to reduce your cloud bill. Just go reduce the size of all your instances or your footprint or your templates in the cloud, right? But there's a reason why you don't do that. There's a reason is, obviously, you could create performance issues. The same with sustainability. You want to minimize your footprint for sustainability, but you can't compromise performance when doing that. So ultimately, when we look at these activities of how do I balance this trade-off between the best performance at the lowest cost while maintaining the smallest footprint and improving my sustainability posture, that's really where we're trying to head. So, Asena, back to you to just kind of pick up on that thread of, again, the trade-offs and how to manage those trade-offs.
Sure. So what we're talking about here, operationalize continuous optimization for real business outcomes. First and foremost, as Tom noted, right, we can't let the application performance suffer. The question is, what exactly do they need to continuously perform? And Turbonomic is solving for this problem. It's looking at your what you have in your existing environment, so working through APIs, you see this under observability, pulling in data that already exists with the tools, platforms, solutions that you're using today. And then it takes that data and maps it out. It understands you have, this number of business applications. It's running across a mix of public cloud and on-prem, or maybe you're in one or the other. But whatever that mix is, whatever those technologies, it's mapping that application stack. How are those applications getting what they need, or in this case, often what they don't need. And then it's generating, it's using that data. The analytics is the key here, right? This is software continuously making decisions to resource those applications. It's generating actions. Now, there's all different types of actions pertinent to the different layers of the stack, the technologies you're using, but they generally fall into these 4 buckets: sizing, placement, scaling, start, stop, right? And this is really, again, looking at that application demand and then matching the available supply to that application to ensure that it gets exactly what it needs. So we've got a bunch of actions, we've got this analysis, but what do you then go do with it, right? The beauty of Turbonomic is that you can automate it. You can take those actions, which are generated by the software. There is no decision making on the part of humans, right? So we're automating that whole process. But then you can either, if you're more comfortable with this, you can just go into the UI, click an action, manually execute that action, one and done. That is, some customers will start out there, but again, the goal is really to have this being done continuously. So customers will, in some cases, schedule, during certain windows, we're going to take certain types of actions, often done when an action might be disruptive to the application. So a VM, VM right sizing, or maybe in the case of integrating with pipelines, workflows, processes, if you have a container right-sizing action, you might want to integrate that with your DevOps, your CI/CD pipeline. And that's both because it can be disruptive, but also you wouldn't want things to be kind of overridden with the next deployment. And then, of course, you can take these actions in real time. All of this is really dependent on how your applications are architected, and then kind of the technology stack that you have. But the goal is continuously automate as much as you can, so that you can actually realize these outcomes. And these are outcomes that we see with our customers on a regular basis. Improving application performance by 20%, reducing public cloud spend by 30 to 50%. And as we've noted, there's an associated reduction in environmental costs. And then increasing team productivity. Obviously, this is taking a huge amount of labor off of individuals and allowing them to focus elsewhere, and increasing speed to market by 40%. So I'm going to just quickly go through, to reiterate, we talked about kind of stitching the application stack together. These are the technologies that we support today. The key point here is that Turbonomic is technology agnostic, right? So whatever you have in your environment, we're going to take that existing data, map it out, and then have the analytics make these resourcing decisions, and then you determine how and when you want to execute and automate them to drive that performance and that elasticity. Now, in terms of how this shows up in the product, so again, it's all about your business applications, right? What are they consuming? What's providing those resources? So understanding all of these relationships from the application to the container platforms, if you have that, to the cloud, to on-prem, storage, network, and the like. And then, I'm mixing up the slides here. So once you have that understanding, looking at the business application, how is it consuming things, but not just the applications as a whole, but the individual transactions. And you'll note on the right here all of these actions that can be taken that are associated with that. And then for individual applications, right? So oftentimes we'll see customers, they'll click into a particular application. They want to see how is it performing, what is that response time, and most importantly, what are the actions that can improve the response time, or if there are opportunities for efficiency, what are those actions? And for those that are, just a note on the bottom, you can explore all this on your own in our sandbox environment at turbonomic.com/try. Just one last point, the actions here that we're talking about, they are applicable to every layer of the stack. So Tom noted earlier, right, that part of the challenge is there's different teams, different data, different tools, and they're not connected. Because Turbonomic is stitching this all together, it's able to determine, okay, if I need to scale out, let's say, pods in this part of the stack, in my Kubernetes application, Turbonomic will make sure there's enough capacity in the underlying nodes to support that, right? So it's driving elasticity at every single layer. And again, you can do this in as much of an automated fashion as you are comfortable with. So we've talked about the product, just a quick introduction there, but bringing it back to the different use cases, Tom, how does this really help people get started today?
The first thing, as I mentioned earlier, when I had the Venn diagram, is we have to make sure that performance is respected and obviously delivered to the end users. Because again, we can lower the cloud bill, we can lower your footprint, but it starts with performance. Once we have that, then we can actually go through optimized cloud. Obviously, we talked about our customers typically see 30 to 50% reduction in the resources they need. That equates to spend as well. Data center optimization, think of it as driving up utilization but lowering the footprint. So how do I drive my servers up and maybe eliminate some servers from my configuration? So that's something that we see customers do, server consolidation or retirement of servers. Again, a lot of benefits to driving up and reducing the footprint for sustainability. And then lastly, Asena mentioned this concept of elasticity, knowing what resources are available, knowing the demand, And adjusting the resources based on fluctuating demand is critical to giving just enough resources to meet your performance requirements while minimizing the footprint, minimizing obviously the cost, but obviously minimizing optimizing sustainability at the same time. So with that, we do think there's an opportunity to follow up, and I'm going to hand it back to the center one more time just to give you a sense for what you could do next to jumpstart this process.
Sure. So additional resources, guys, as I mentioned a little earlier, we do have a live sandbox environment where you can just go into our UI, poke around. There are demo guides in there if it's helpful to you. You can click on this hyperlink and open that up right away, but it is turbonomic.com/try. And then if you're interested, we also have a hands-on session coming up. So our 15-minute Friday sandbox, March 25th, 1 p.m., and that's really where we have our technical experts coming in, walking you through some of the use cases in the UI, and you can follow along in the same environment with them, again, through using Try Turbonomic, the sandbox environment. And then last, I know there's a handout that we've got for you guys. It's a sustainability white paper, just kind of expanding on some of the topics that we talked about here today. But we've also got here, you can click to download, our recently published 2022 State of Multi-Cloud. So that covers everything from sustainability to trends in the labor shortage, as well as just cloud adoption, container adoption, serverless, and the like. I highly recommend that you check this out. We do take a unique lens on this, sort of comparing how leaders are kind of tackling their digital strategies in comparison to their peers. So, and we've got 4 years of data trending that, so it's pretty cool to check out. And that's really it. I think we'll go to any questions.
Okay, super. Yeah, that was a really interesting presentation, especially the stuff on the sustainability front. And I'll leave this additional questions slide up for a minute before we put the poll up, just so people have an opportunity to click on those resources there. One of the questions that I wanted to ask based on your presentation was what do you find broadly about the sustainability of resources in public clouds versus on-premises data center? Is one generally more efficient than the other, or is it too dependent on specifics?
Yes. So generally speaking, there is a huge difference in terms of the environmental impact of running workloads in a public cloud versus a data center. If you think about just the scale at which they're operating, right? They are able to have the economy of efficiencies there. But in addition to that, they generally have the resources, right, to invest in the renewable energy, to have that kind of dedicated to solar farm and wind farm, or set up their data center in climates where it's a bit cooler, right? So they're really focusing on this and making an investment there. That said, companies, there are clear business reasons for certain companies to run a data center, and that's just the reality, right? So the question here is not, an either or. Either you're sustainable or you are making your prioritizing your business or prioritizing the performance of your apps. It's how do you sustainably operate and achieve your business goals, but then have as minimal impact on the environment as possible. Does that help answer the question?
Definitely, yeah, thanks. We had a question here from Prasoon who's wondering, speaking of cloud environments, says, if I have 3 different cloud environments, AWS, Azure, and Google, then will I need to apply 3 different licenses for Turbonomic on top of those hyperscalers? Or, how does licensing work there in sort of a multi-cloud environment?
Right. Yeah, so you would not need 3 different licenses. We price by the workload. So again, it could be, depending on the size of your environment, and it's really only, the hundreds of thousands of entities or workloads in the environment where we would be getting into multiple instances. I should say multiple hundreds of thousands. But for 90% of customers, 95% of customers, a single instance is fine. And from that single instance, you're just pointing to your different cloud providers and any other technologies that you want to kind of pull in that data to build out your application stack and run the analysis and take those actions.
Okay, super. Next question here is from Rob, who's asking, are there any data centers where I can choose my power provider and their generation source? And I'm assuming he's talking about cloud data centers or co-location people. Is that something that's becoming any more common where people are giving their customers options for their power sources?
To my knowledge, I don't think that's pretty a very common scenario. I think if you are thinking about kind of the sources of energy for your data center, you are either thinking in terms of where am I going to build the data center, if you want to kind of potentially set up shop in a cleaner grid, or you're building your data center and planning for kind of an independent source of energy that's cleaner, or maybe you're taking advantage of kind of renewable energy tax credits and like. But again, I think there's a whole mix of things, but not very common where you'd sort of, an existing data center and kind of picking that based off of the cleanness of the grid.
Yep, gotcha. Great. Got a couple of questions here from Carrie, who I suspect is an MSP, asking about if Turbonomics is appropriate in the SMB space, or if it's really more of a medium and up sort of solution. So I'll ask that question first, and then I'll ask the second one.
Sure. Yeah. So it is definitely. We do have smaller customers. I'll say that. I'd say maybe kind of we tend to have more and more of the larger customers, just because the more complex your environment, the more you really do need software to manage these things. But I think kind of at the, let's say, 500 workload mark, right? That's where customers are finding that they cannot manage this on their own without putting performance or cost overruns at risk.
Okay, super. And then the second part of that question, Carrie was wondering, is the application multi-tenant capable? Do you guys have an MSP practice, or is that not something you guys do?
We do not have an MSP practice today, and I'll just answer it briefly that way.
Okay, super. I guess let's. We're running out of time. There are a ton of questions in here. If you guys have any time to, hang out in the chat afterward, I'm sure people would appreciate it. But just I guess a last question, and actually I apologize. I forgot to put the poll up, so I'll do that now. Just as I'm asking, any recommendations as far as next steps for people. If they want to get started with Turbonomic. Okay, well, Tom and Asena, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.
And we'll just leave that. Yeah, thanks again for being on. And we'll just leave that up for a second while we go to our first prize drawing of the day. So this is for one of the 3 $500 Amazon gift cards. And the winner of the first one is Carrie Broderick from Wisconsin. So congratulations to Carrie. We'll be in touch about claiming your prize. Okay, thanks to everybody who has filled out this poll. I'll just leave that up there for another couple of seconds, and then we will move on to our next presentation. All right. So our next session comes from Scale Computing, and presenting for Scale Computing is Alan Conboy from the Office of the CTO. Alan, welcome to the EcoCast.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, take it away.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get this kicked off. And I'm going to take a little bit of a different spin here. Breaking the chains that bind you. Now, the reason behind this is simple, and it's actually buried in the title of this EcoCast. Data center to the cloud, optimizing and monitoring IT infrastructure. Now, that seems like it should be a fairly straightforward thing. But the fact of the matter, it isn't. You know, brief history lesson here. How did we get to where we're even looking at tools for our tools to do our jobs? Well, it has to do with the technology swings that happen in 20-year cycles, going from mainframe back in the day up through distributed and client server that we all cut our teeth in, and re-centralization into the cloud, and then redistribution. You see, redistribution really comes down to redefinition. Okay? The place where business is done has changed. And it's called edge these days. But what that really means is you're literally needing to be able to optimize, monitor, command, and control all the way from the edge to the fog to the core to the cloud. So let's talk about what really has changed here. Because quite frankly, it's not 2015 anymore. It's not 2019 either. As a matter of fact, the way business is done today would be almost unrecognizable to somebody a decade ago. The reason why is pretty straightforward. Almost everything has changed. You see, where business is done, it's not in the halls of the data center. I don't know about you, but I don't recall having a business meeting or a contract evaluation sitting next to racks of gear in somebody's data center, much less the hallowed halls of Amazon or Azure. You see, business is done where people actually do things. Today's world, we call that the edge. And I would posit that the edge really is the data center in its new expression. The data center, as we've known it for years, it's almost become the fog layer. The cloud, it's absolutely still there and has its purpose. Here's the thing. The mass migration to the cloud, as you heard before in some of the intros and presentations coming up to this point, the mass migration to the cloud didn't really work out terribly well for everything. And it became obvious that a hybridized world, not to reuse that overused term, is the one that makes the most sense. Putting the applications that need to be in the cloud in the cloud. You know, email's gone up there and it's not coming back. But real-time applications, monitoring, PCI compliance, retail operations, etc., those don't happen in the data centers anymore. They happen at the edge. So what you're really talking about as you talk about optimizing and monitoring IT infrastructure is how do we handle command and control with pieces of IT technology and applications placed where they actually need to run. And the truth of the matter, well, it has to do with tying it all together. Now, let's expand on that a little bit. Okay? Today's world is a Tower of Babel. What I mean by that is you have all of these disparate pieces of technology designed essentially in isolation from each other, trying to be glued together in ways that often just don't fit, can't even be made to fit. Heck, that's part of why we're having this discussion of how on earth do you do this? Well, the truth of the matter is it shouldn't have been done this way. But it was, and here we are. Okay? This history of how we got to where we are is why, as IT folks, we spend half our lives finding or building tools for our tools, for the tools, to do our jobs. It was never designed cohesively from the ground up. But that's being fixed as we speak. Okay? You see, when you take a cohesive approach, a top-to-bottom stack approach, to all of the pieces and parts and layers that go into a true top-to-bottom, edge-to-fog, to core-to-cloud solution to support business, to support any of our activities, you wind up with something that actually works together the way it should be, that includes all of the pieces that should have been there from day one, that knows directly how to talk and interact specifically with each other. But most importantly, doesn't require a meta upon meta of tools to interact with tools to interact with tools, but rather just works. So let's talk about that new data center, the edge, where people actually do things, where business actually gets accomplished. It's outside those four walls of the traditional data center. It's in the oil fields, in the dealerships, in the power poles. It's at the retail stores. It's in the home. Heck, in today's world, 40-some-odd% of retail activity takes place in the house. Well, let's face it, that's not exactly what you'd call the data center. Not even close. Every person attending this, they bought something on Amazon in the past week. They didn't get in their car and drive somewhere. So the edge, it's not the legacy data center. It's where business actually happens. But here's where that gets interesting. How do you handle that? How do you tie all of those pieces of the edge, the new DC, back to the core, through the fog, to the cloud? When you start to look at what the edge is, well, quite frankly, it's a pain multiplier. Why do we do it? Simple. Taking this approach has accelerated business at a level nobody anticipated even 5 years ago. But what do I mean by pain multiplier? Your average barista is not a VCP and a CCNE and a SNIA certified storage engineer, not a multi-cloud engineer. The same can be said of the store manager, etc. Every single event that can happen from a technology perspective at the edge is multiplied by number of sites. Tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of locations that are, shall we say, expert-free. So what that really means is an infrastructure built from all the way at that edge endpoint that runs on tiny devices, that handles the high availability, fault tolerance, that handles the traditional job of the IT admin in and of itself at these tens of thousands of locations, that frees up those admins to be able to do the things that actually move the business forward in today's new world. Rather than continue to exist in this meta of meta environments by taking a holistic approach to how infrastructure should have been done in the first place, things get to change. we start having this ability to implement infrastructure that anybody can implement, from the barista to the store manager to the field worker. It doesn't require rolling trucks. That's managed centrally across entire fleets. Everything from firmware updates to you name it. The key is adapting our businesses to work with how infrastructure actually needs to run today. Not trying to drag 2005 forward. The key to accomplishing that is holistically designed, holistically built, top-to-bottom stacks that run identically from the edge to the fog to the core to the cloud, whether you're talking about containerization, virtual infrastructure, doesn't matter. Legacy applications running right happily alongside the latest, greatest containerized applications, all managed from a single pane and made simple. See, the key to today's world and tomorrow's is simply this. Understand that business isn't going to happen at the core the way it used to. It happens where the rubber meets the road, and what don't you have at that location? You don't have the experts. So you need infrastructure that handles it for you, that self-optimizes. Efficiency at every level. Simplicity that means you don't have to have those VCPs and CCNEs and SNIA certified storage engineers in places where they simply don't exist. Now our platform, HC3, was built to do exactly that. Starting with things as small as the Intel compute card, Elements, NUX, all the way up through to the 1U, 2U, 3U, 4U gear that you're used to seeing, from the tiniest of the tiny to the largest of the large, fleet managed across the globe, that anybody can implement, that includes security, that includes survivability, that automates high availability and fault tolerance in a way that you just don't have to think about. That's what HC3 is really all about. We bring an unprecedented level of flexibility, being able to start with designs that can literally fit in your pocket at a level of efficiency that isn't matched anywhere else in the industry. Imagine an entire top-to-bottom hyper-converged stack, unmodified, that fits directly in a backpack with high availability, fault tolerance, lose any component anywhere at any time, and everything just keeps going, done at a price point that actually makes sense at every single level. See, that's what, how do I put this? That's what computing means today. It means matching the needs of business and how it's done in today's world to what infrastructure should have been all along. Let that soak all the way in for a moment. Focus your resources on moving the business forward, not on an unbelievably deep level of tools to accomplish the basics. Now, in today's world, there's been quite the discussion about being green, over-provisioning in the cloud, over-provisioning on the ground in the traditional data center. Let's face it, there isn't a cloud out there that isn't wildly over-provisioned. whether it's Azure having 100% more gear than what they actually need to run, to a legacy data center spending way more money than they actually need to support 20 or 30% of their workloads. If you want to talk green, talk about right-sizing at every single individual level, not consuming more than you actually need, while still having the ability to grow on a just-in-time basis and not being tied to the infrastructure you already have in place from a technical requirement perspective. Being able to take the next increment of growth based on the latest technology simply by Lego block style snapping in a new, even faster piece. It's that kind of dynamic flexibility that we're bringing to the table for you folks. From the edge to the fog, to the cloud, and the core. This is what scale computing is really all about, is giving you an entire top-to-bottom infrastructure that lets you not have to think about your infrastructure, that's inherently protected from multiple levels of attack surfaces, but you don't require experts to run in places where you just, let's face it, don't have experts. That's automated in a way nobody else can quite get to. So let's talk about tying those pieces together. Imagine that you're a large retail chain. Grocery stores, for example, or maybe a shipping company. Doesn't really matter which. Maybe a manufacturing company or a foundry. You've got sites galore. You need to implement a solution that runs from the edge all the way to the core and everywhere in between. You don't want to roll trucks. You don't want to have people having to manage tons of VPN connections and jump through hoops to do the basics. You need that control plane that ties it all together. That control plane allows you to do things like, scan a box, ship that to each of the individual stores where it needs to go to, and that barista, that store manager, is able to take that device out of the box, plug in power, click in a Cat6 cable, hit a power button, and walk away. That device already knows exactly how to call home, how to configure itself, how to grab its workloads, come up, come online, and go to work without anybody having to do anything else. That automatically can survive component failure, lose any node anywhere at any time, lose any drive anywhere at any time, and everything just keeps going. That firmware updates, those chasing it around through all of the different possible permutations, they become non-events. Firmware updates for each individual site at the click of a button from a single pane of glass that non-interruptively, non-destructively updates things at every single level. Those are the kinds of things that scale brings to the table for you. Now, how does that tie to optimizing and monitoring IT infrastructure? It gets rid of the need for building tools on tools on tools and shopping for some other tool to make this tool work with that tool to work with your workloads. It's built from the ground up to work directly at every single level. That infrastructure management. At a glance, I can see what's happening at all 6,000 of my stores, all 10,000 of my sites. With the things I need to pay attention to already bubbled to the top for me, and in most cases, automatically remediated without me having to do anything. Certainly without me having to roll a truck. Now, what does this all boil down to? Infrastructure has changed. The definitions have changed. Where business is done has changed. Don't be trying to play catch-up from how things were done 5 or 10 years ago. Start by rolling out something that lets you focus on the future, not focus on 63,268 different tools. That's what it's really all about. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Great stuff. And we'll leave the leave your call to action slide up there for just a second. If people want to reach out to you, there's your email. But we do have a bunch of questions in from the audience. Let's see. The first one from Byron is asking, is this a hypervisor to replace VMware?
It includes the hypervisor, absolutely. Okay. You see, the point of hyper-converged infrastructure, all those years ago when we very first came out with it, back 2010, 2011, was to eliminate stacks and disparate parts from different vendors by combining them into a super infrastructure, if you will. That's actually where the term hyper-converged came from. You know, the analyst Arun Tanaja was the guy that actually came up with the term specifically to describe this approach to computing. Now, originally, hyper-converged infrastructures were targeted just at very specific workloads, but the truth of the matter is hyper-converged infrastructure, by including hypervisors, including storage stacks, including networking control, including all of the basic pieces, found themselves a perfect home in SMB, mid-market, and distributed enterprises. And as you start looking at what the edge is, you may have these major global multinational corporations with 10,000 sites. But if you drill down to each of the sites, what are they? Well, they've got a shocking resemblance to an SMB. Being able to set those workloads up on modern infrastructure that allows the placement of this application really needs to go right here because it's real-time monitoring a production line and needs to be able to kick out in milliseconds, in microseconds, defects. That doesn't lend itself to cloud terribly well, does it? You can put applications where they actually need to be throughout the chain. So yes, it does include the hypervisor, but gets rid of the hypervisor licensing costs, and it includes so very much more.
Okay, great. Thanks for that explanation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go ahead and put the poll up here for anybody for people who would like more information about scale computing. You can go ahead and enter what kind of information would be most helpful for you. And Alan, I just have to say I really enjoyed your reference to the pain multiplier and expert-free locations. That's such a trenchant observation.
You know, I appreciate that. It's funny when I look at how these tools have been built and tools on tools on tools. It's like the ultimate expression of Douglas Adams' life, the universe, and everything. It really is. You know, what's the answer? 42. Well, we got to build a bigger tool to figure out the question.
Right. That's
where we are from an IT perspective globally, and man, there is a better way.
Yeah.
We know because we built it.
Another question that came in here from Priscilla is asking, can I use the flagship products of scale computing agnostic of the file system in my server or the cloud service providers that I use?
Of course. You see, in Scale's HC3 implementation, we don't use file systems at all. We don't need to. File systems exist inside of workloads. Workloads, whether containerized or virtualized, running as VMs, that's where file systems need to exist. Underlying that is our own proprietary block-level implementation that we built out a decade ago, Scribe, that ties directly into multiple clouds in multiple ways.
This next question comes from Eric. And you'd made a bunch of interesting comments about, edge, the edge being sort of the new data center. And Eric is wondering, what are the primary challenges to edge computing? I know you went into that, a bit during your presentation, but, is there anything else you can say about, what you see as sort of the primary challenges?
Outside of the scope of volume, yeah, there's lots. You've got the inherent problems associated with the fact that edge computing can be somebody's home office, somebody's cell phone, can be the actual oil field, can be where the businessman sits down face to face and meets another businessman to accomplish something. You've got multiple layers of things you need to think about there, and we've tried to do that for you, from security to connectivity to securing things all the way through the chain and giving you a place to put the workloads that need to be at each individual level in a cohesive way.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Alan, it looks like we're running out of time. There are more questions in the chat, so if you've got a few minutes and you can check those out afterward, I'm sure everybody would appreciate it. But thanks so much for coming on. And if somebody wants to get started with scale computing or find out more, what do you recommend?
You know what? Send me a note. I'll happily take some time out of my day. If that's a little too directly on, start at my website, scalecomputing.com.
Okay.
You see, more than just telling you, we'll show you. We'll let you get hands-on with some of this stuff.
Awesome. I did put your slide back up with your email on it, and I'll also mention to check out the Scale Computing PDF in the Handouts section. But Alan, thanks so much for coming on and bringing us up to speed on scale computing. Really appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Thanks again, guys.
And now it's time for our next presentation in the EcoCast on optimizing and monitoring IT infrastructure. And our next session comes from Rubrik. And presenting for Rubrik is Drew Russell, Technical Product Manager. So let me turn things over to Drew.
Microsoft security practice here at Rubrik. I want to spend a few minutes with everybody today talking about Microsoft 365. We're going to cover, what's the high-level landscape look like from 365 these days, and why that translates into more and more of our Rubrik customers looking at 365 data protection seriously for probably the first time, since they've been a part of that platform. And then dig a little bit deeper into the architecture aspects of how we protect 365 itself. So let's jump right into it here. Like I said, wanted to cover what does today's Microsoft 365 ecosystem look like. Part of my job is talking to customers across the globe, every industry you can think of, every customer size you can think of, and they're all telling me, almost the exact same thing. Now more than ever, their business critical operations are flowing through Microsoft 365. And by its nature, that means more and more business critical data lives in the 365 ecosystem. And if we look at the stats Microsoft provides around this, it tells the exact same story. Just this exponential growth that they've seen over the last 2 years, with that only increasing with hybrid work kind of being the new de facto standard that's in place. Again, kind of across the globe here. The other thing that almost all of our customers are telling us is, they have a very limited last line in defense for this data. And that translates to, 74% of the folks surveyed in this case have no data protection in place for this business critical data in 365. And since there is that limited last line of defense and all that business critical important data living in the ecosystem, today's threat groups view Microsoft 365 as a gold mine. And this is a direct quote from some of our partners over at Mandiant If you're not familiar with Mandiant, they are one of the industry's leading cybersecurity incident response organizations. They're basically who gets called if the Fortune 500s of the world are breached. They go in and determine how that breach happened and then help the customer get back up and running. So these are the folks with the boots on the ground, analyzing real-world attack situations, and they're, across their board, they're seeing a plethora of money being spent on understanding Microsoft 365 and then simultaneously how to attack it by these threat groups. That's one of the reasons why it's very easy to go out and find headline after headline, of these external attacks happening, across the board. It's not just one organization experiencing it. It's not just two. 70% plus of organizations have experienced some kind of attack happening in the 365 ecosystem. The other kind of really important thing to remember here, in the overall context of Microsoft 365 data protection is it's not just these external threats you have to keep in mind. It's also these internal situations that can happen, whether it is, a rogue admin going in and, causing havoc, or like this example from KPMG where they went to apply a retention policy. And if you're not familiar with those, we'll kind of cover those next. They applied that retention policy to 145,000 users accidentally. And, with a click of a button, all of their chat history was deleted. So different situations like that really kind of have to be combined with these external threats that we're seeing in the ecosystem today to really understand, what the overall threat landscape looks like. So the next thing, you have to look at here is, how does Microsoft look at data protection for Microsoft 365, specifically zero trust data security? If you're not familiar with that term, in essence, it means, never trust, always verify. And this slide is, in essence, a copy and paste directly from the Microsoft documentation, where they are focused around complying with legal and regulatory standards. And the way they have that categorized is into these kind of four broad areas. And each of these areas have a multitude of tools underneath it to help achieve these goals. So let's kind of start with the left side here and work our way through the flow here. So first step here is pretty obvious, right? You have to understand what data lives in 365 in order to protect it. Once you understand that data, you can start doing things like apply different protection policies to encrypt it, to restrict access. Once that's in place, the next step is, how do I present that data from being leaked accidentally, or how do I detect different risky behavior on top of that data? And then the last section here is govern your data, where the main goal is to retain the information that you need and then delete the rest. That way it can't be affected in any kind of, situation. And this is really the main area I want to focus on here. This is traditionally where we see our customers focused in terms of a core kind of data protection aspect in terms of backup and recovery. So dig into the govern your data section, right? This is, again, for compliance and regulatory requirements, not for backup recovery. And this is by design for Microsoft. The way they have this broken up is in two kind of broad categories here. So information governance tools and records management tools. Information governance tools are kind of the broadest area here. This is your classic business data that would live in the ecosystem, PowerPoints, PDFs, everything that you use to run your organization on a day in, day out basis. The main goal with the tools under this category is, keep what you need and delete what you don't. Like I said earlier, the concept here being, if the data is not present, it can't be, accessed accidentally. It can't be, deleted by a rogue admin or, some kind of threat actor that got access to your environment. The next section here for records management is really focused around, actually, let me go back here. So the main tool that customers use in this information governance section is retention policies. Vast majority are going to be familiar with these. These are kind of on by default. In essence, what you do is create a policy that says, keep your data for X period of time. After that time period, it passes, delete that data from your ecosystem. And this is all automatically handled on the back end for Microsoft. So really a set and forget tool. All right, so going back to records management here, these are very specific use cases, kind of the diamonds here in the graphic. And the tools around this are very heavily centric around different legal and compliance tools or compliance regulations. And then other kind of very critical business data that can't be affected in some shape or form. The main tools we see customers using in this case is litigation hold. Pretty self-explanatory. What litigation hold is, mark some piece of data as being on hold. Once that data is marked, if anything is deleted or modified, a copy is again automatically created on the back end in the 365 ecosystem, so it can be accessed later on if needed. And this is either through their extensive e-discovery suite that comes part of 365, or exporting it out to the corporate lawyers involved here. All right, so now that we have kind of a high-level understanding of what these native tools are, the question that's really driving all of the conversations today around Microsoft 365 protection is, what would you do if you're hit by a ransomware attack? Or what would you do if you experienced a rogue admin, or somebody on your internal teams accidentally deleting the business critical files in your ecosystem? And these questions are a top-down question usually. So they're being asked by the C-suite, they're being asked by the board of directors, and then probably just as importantly, or maybe even more importantly, is being asked by the cybersecurity insurance auditors. If you guys haven't had the, I'll call it the fun of dealing with cybersecurity insurance, the short version here is it is very difficult to get these days because so many payouts have been happening. The rates are just astronomical in this case. So if you're going through and if your company's looking at this insurance or trying to decrease your premiums, the auditors are going through and asking these questions. It's, do you have this business critical data living in 365? And if your Azure environment is compromised or your Microsoft 365 environment is compromised, what would you do in these cases? So, in order to answer that question right, you kind of have to understand what this threat landscape looks like and how these native tools enable you to recover from there. So what we've seen happening is, it's your core parameters being breached. It's not 365 itself. They have a very, very solid platform in place in terms of their security mechanisms, but that 365 environment is still connected to the rest of your ecosystem. So threat actors can get into your ecosystem through any number of means. Once they have that, we've seen them work their way up the stack to where they can get global admin access. At that point, they obviously have keys to the kingdom, so they can do different things like exfiltrate the data off of your platform, send it to their command and control servers, and then delete that data. Once that happens, you'll get the ransomware note, and then you have to figure out how to get that data back and get it back quickly. So the two options you have in place are to restore from those retention policies that we talked about earlier. In this case, though, they are since they're not designed for backup recovery, they can actually be used as an attack surface to your ecosystem. So like we mentioned earlier from Mandiant and their take on today's threat actors, knowing the Microsoft ecosystem extremely well, they're familiar with these retention policies. They went through, created a new one that said, find any data in the ecosystem that is older than a day old and automatically delete it. And just like that, everything is erased from the ecosystem. The other option here is that litigation hold we talked about. At the end of the day, though, litigation hold is not designed for mass protection. If you kind of think back to the image we had, there was that small subset of those diamonds where Microsoft would apply these litigation holds. At the same time, litigation hold by its nature also nullifies, some of the other aspects of these native tools. Very easy to talk about retention policy here again, where the goal is to remove the data from your ecosystem. That way it can't be compromised. In this case, litigation hold, kind of negates that. The data still lives in your environment in this case. So basically that leaves you with no good options, and you're forced to pay that ransom to have, those threat actors send you back your data to get it back up and running. The other really important part to remember here is it's not just your 365 ecosystem that's being attacked in this case. It's the rest of your cloud workloads. It's the rest of your data center workloads simultaneously being breached and attacked here. So how does Rubrik kind of come into play here, and how can we help in these situations? So The most important aspect of this is being able to create this logical air gap between your Microsoft environment and then the backups that are stored in Rubrik. So this is a full SaaS offering. We'll go into a little bit of the details here in a second, but in essence, we reach out to Microsoft 365, pull the data back into Rubrik, and then have that fully segmented from your environment. That way, if threat actors do get those global admin credentials, they don't have access to your backups. They can't delete those. So they'll go through and, delete your data. But in this case, once you get the ransomware note, if you have Rubrik in place, you're able to actually get that data back up and running since it's in a fully isolated cloud vault on the Rubrik side. At the same time, it's not just being able to recover your Microsoft 365 environment in this case, it's being able to unify that protection across all your workloads, unify those restoration jobs. That way you can ensure your entire environment is back up and running. The really important part to kind of note here too, this isn't a Rubrik versus Microsoft story. And in fact, it's quite literally the exact opposite. Microsoft has an amazing suite of tools focused around compliance. Our customers use them on a regular basis, and more importantly, they use them in tandem with what Rubrik brings to the table. So the overall recommendation, right, is to leverage everything Microsoft has in place. Identify your data, restrict the access, have the encryption in place. But what Rubrik does is allow you to protect from those external and internal threats that we mentioned earlier, and do it in a way that is fully automated from a management perspective, and then being able to get as granular as needed from the restoration jobs, and then do that in bulk. So worst case scenario happens, your entire 365 ecosystem is blown away from a data perspective. There's all the business critical data that you need to get back up and running. So Rubrik allows you to do that in an easy to manage fashion. And that's exactly why probably, a month and a half, 2 months ago, we announced that Microsoft took an equity stake in Rubrik, specifically around a kind of core joint mission statement up here, right, up on the left, I should say, all around being able to take a concept of zero trust data security and apply it to each of our joint customers. And really all that is being driven around 2021 main imperative of ransomware. And this is, like we talked about earlier, it's a C-suite level conversation. It's a board level, top of mind across the board. So, this investment from, Microsoft allows us to do a whole bunch of things on the back end, in terms of ensuring we have adequate protection in place, leveraging their engineering resources, their product management teams to make sure, the joint products we have in place meet their standards, meet the Rubrik standards, and allow our customers to have a holistic data protection solution, for any kind of internal, external threat scenarios. So the fun part here, how does it work? So first and foremost, security is top of mind when we design the solution. So if we work our way through the stack here, start with being able to authenticate into your Microsoft 365 ecosystem. All of this is done through what Microsoft calls modern authentication. It's their implementation of OAuth. What that means is we never have access to your credentials. Microsoft gives us a one-time access token, and then from there, we'll create what are called enterprise applications to enable our API access into the 365 ecosystem. And then those enterprise applications are scoped specifically to the API permissions we need. Once we have those in place, we'll reach out to 365, like I said, ingest that data into the Rubrik platform, all fully encrypted at flight, and then land that data in a Rubrik cloud vault that is also fully encrypted. The important aspect here is that this is fully isolated from your environment. If you're 365 or Azure or really your main environment is compromised, these backups are secured in a Rubrik controlled instance. Once that initial configuration is placed, you can take our Sla policies and apply those to each of the high-level applications. So think of applying an Sla policy to OneDrive, to SharePoint, Exchange. That way you have a base level of protection in place. And I guess to take a step back here too, if you're not familiar with the Sla policies, what they allow you to do is define your business use case and logic for backups. Take a backup every 4 hours, keep it for 30 days. Take a backup for a month, keep that for a year, and just kind of automatically handle that on the back end. You can also get down to the individual user level and get as granular as you want to with these SLA policies. That way you can ensure your VIPs, your top priority users, have a more frequent backup frequency than maybe the intern who started yesterday. When talking about Microsoft 365 protection, the most important aspect to remember here is it's an extremely complex API system that we have to work with here. If I relate this back to the on-prem world and taking like a VMware snapshot, we'll call the specific API for snapshot and then ingest the data into Rubrik. There's no equivalent of a snapshot API in Microsoft 365. So there is 4 or 5 different APIs that we leverage on the back end. The main one being Microsoft Graph. Microsoft Graph allows us to talk to the individual applications through a single endpoint. But then each of those individual applications also have a specific API dedicated to them. So there's a OneDrive API, an Exchange API, etc. And each of these APIs have their pros and cons. So which one works best in situation A, which one works best in situation B, and at the same time, what happens if these API fails? They're used by something like 300 million users across the globe. So it's not a matter of if the API will fail, it's a matter of when. So how do we automatically handle those failures transparently and ensure that we are always ingesting your data according to the SLA you define as part of your protection policy? The other really important part here is eking out the performance of these Microsoft APIs. So, since they are globally available, Microsoft does an amazing job of, maybe amazing job, not the best way to describe it, but they very, very heavily throttle these APIs. If we're talking to a single connection point in a 365, we can hit those throttling limits almost instantaneously. Which is exactly why our approach is to load balance our connections into the 365 ecosystem across multiple enterprise applications. And if you remember, these are the enterprise applications are how we have API access into 365. So we're able to achieve an industry leading level of performance to get your data back as quickly as possible here. The other part to kind of keep in mind here too is the underlying architecture plays a pretty important role in this as well. So under the covers, we're using the Azure Kubernetes service to dynamically scale up our compute workloads to meet your demand. So, for example, if you're taking a snapshot, we'll create a new container, or if you're doing a new restore job, create another container, and we can automatically scale those up to whatever whatever limits we need to ensure we're meeting your performance and reliability expectations. And at the same time, all of this applies to the rest of your ecosystem, whether it is in Azure or in your data center with vSphere. You can take these same SLA policies and apply them to those workloads as well, and then utilize the Rubrik Players interface here, which is our SaaS-based application, to manage the recovery of those workloads in the event of an attack. So that's all I really wanted to cover today. The main goal was to make sure you have an understanding of what today's ecosystem looks like for 365, both in terms of its overall usage and what the threat landscape looks like for that, and how Rubrik and Microsoft have joined together to offer a solution that allows you to take advantage of best of both worlds. The native tools from Microsoft that are focused around compliance and regulatory issues, and then the core backup and recovery that Rubrik offers to protect you from internal and external threats. The other thing too is we're going to, I know we talked about doing a demo here. We actually have a new guided workthrough that we're going to send out as a leave it behind here. You can get hands-on access to the player's interface and walk through a demo yourself. In my opinion, it's way easier to understand that ecosystem by clicking through and getting actual hands-on time. So we will send that out here after the webinar as well. So appreciate everybody's time today. And I am in chat here if you guys have any questions. So please feel free to throw those out.
Okay, great presentation today from Drew. I appreciate that reference to the fun of dealing with cybersecurity insurance. It was a really nice overview and update on what Rubrik is doing to protect Microsoft 365 customers from ransomware and other sources of data loss. Looks like we had a lot of questions that we can't get to right here, but as Drew mentioned, he and the team are in chat and will do their best to respond to all of these questions. We do have a poll question for you here on the screen. We appreciate your feedback on additional resources that you'd like to see from Rubrik. And thanks to everybody who's already responded to the poll. We'll just leave that up there for a minute. We do appreciate your feedback. And then we'll move on to our next presentation shortly. I'd also like to remind everyone about the Handouts section. We've got a link from Rubrik in there that goes to a page with a number of their assets, including a ransomware assessment tool, information about Rubrik's upcoming Forward conference, and several other items. So be sure to check that out, as well as the handouts from all the presenters today. And feel free to follow all those links, grab all of those PDFs, and share them with colleagues. And while I do leave the poll up here for a second, it is time for our second prize drawing. And the winner of this $500 Amazon gift card is Marsha Johnson from Alabama. Congratulations to Marsha. We'll be in touch about claiming your prize. And now it's time for our next presentation in the Data Center to the Cloud EcoCast, and our next session comes from Gigamon. And presenting for Gigamon is Martin Crew, Senior Director for Industry Solutions. Martin, welcome to the EcoCast.
Thank you so much.
The floor is yours.
All right, well, thanks so much, and hello, everybody. So my name is Martin Crew. I'm responsible for industry solution marketing at Gigamon, and I'm going to talk to you today on the topic, as you all know, of optimizing and monitoring IT infrastructure as organizations move from the data center to the cloud. So we have a slightly different way of talking about this at Gigamon. We actually talk about going from the core to the cloud. So you'll see some references to that in the presentation as we go through. So I've got a very straightforward agenda. So for those of you not familiar with Gigamon, I have a one-slide overview as to who Gigamon is. And then I'm going to get into the meat of the presentation and talk about how organizations have evolved over the last several years, really a couple of decades, and how the monitoring challenges have grown as the complexity of the IT infrastructure has grown. Then we're going to sort of move to talk a bit more about Gigamon and talk about our contention, which is whether you're doing monitoring, whether you're looking to optimize, whether you're using observability tools, the key to success in all of these areas is having visibility to the underlying data. So that'll be a good part of what I talk about. And then I'm going to finish out talking about the most common use cases we see with our customers that relate to this topic, and highlighting one customer that everyone's going to know because it touched probably everybody on the call, or at least everybody in the US on the call. And then we will just do a very brief wrap-up. So with that, next slide, please, and I'll talk a little bit about Gigamon. All right, so we're going to talk about Gigamon at a glance. So a little bit about the organization. So we've been around about 15 years. We have 4,200 customers worldwide, and these are the largest, most sophisticated organizations you can really think about. They are highly distributed. They've got very complex infrastructures, and all of them are at some point on their journey from the core to the cloud. And really all of them are now working in a hybrid environment, and not just a hybrid, meaning on-prem and single cloud. They're using on-premise, they're using virtual, and they're using multiple clouds. In fact, 92% of our customers are in that world. So these customers include 83 of the Fortune 100, most of the top 10 global banks, healthcare providers, mobile operators, and all 10 of the top 10 US federal agencies. So that's a little bit about us. Let me see if the slide advance is now working. Okay, all right, cool, thanks. Okay, so let's talk about from the core to the cloud, talk about how we started out and what's really complicated that. So we all know that even when we were working within a single network data center, things were complex. There was no doubt about that. But over time, as we know, that complexity has increased. If you can just click there, please. So the rising complexity, as I mentioned, is driven by things like the increased use of hybrid infrastructures and cloud infrastructures. And as I said, 92% of enterprises are heading in that direction. If you could click again, please. Okay. Looking forward, well, sort of looking present day and looking forward, we see a big driver for increased complexity and this move to the cloud is going to be the availability of 5G. Most of the analysts are forecasting that there are going to be upwards of 1 billion 5G connections by 2023. And one of the things, if you can just click here, please, one of the things we think that's going to give rise to, we can just click and advance, again, thank you, is massive increase in the use of IoT and OT. So obviously for those organizations who are in manufacturing and utilities or sort of appropriate industries, using ICS and OT technologies has been at the core of what they've done for years and years. And now they and all the other organizations are moving heavily into using IoT, because essentially everything within the organization is smart, whether it's the keypad that gives you access to the building, the thermostats and the HVAC that regulate temperature, the security systems, the cameras, everything is smart. Everything is generating signals. And all of these, unfortunately, represent points of vulnerability. So one of the things that we're seeing in response to this massive increase in the number of devices on the network and potential for future similar increase is organizations are having to really look at their security infrastructures. And obviously security is top of mind for every organization today. And when we start to look at the Gigamon use cases, you'll see that the vast majority of them are very much security driven. One of the big trends that we're seeing is organizations talking about, investigating, thinking about zero trust, and how can they either the philosophy of zero trust, which is, as the name implies, trust nothing on the network, no user, no device, no single piece of infrastructure. Organizations are thinking about how they want to apply that concept to their organization. Whilst they may not be moving to a pure play zero trust architecture, everyone is adopting that philosophy as we can see it, and implementing some part of that as part of their next generation security architecture. Okay, and then the final advance on this slide. And one of the things that we're also seeing is that the data center is not going away. So as I mentioned, the vast majority of our customers and all enterprise customers are hybrid in some sense, and we're seeing now a lot of those organizations figuring out really where the cloud fits, where it doesn't fit within their overall infrastructure. And as part of that, they are reinvesting in the data center. So we're seeing a lot of building of next-gen data centers on a global basis. Okay, that's the final build on that one. Thank you, great. So the overall complexity is that it is only going to increase. So we have to accept that the infrastructure we're all going to be working with is inherently complex. So what this diagram is showing you, and it's the start of a little build sequence we're going to do here, is that the multiplicity of devices that you're using, the multiplicity of tools that you're using to manage those devices, all the different environments that you're operating across, creates a very, very complex network of relationships between all these different components on the system. Our belief is that there is a better way to manage that, to gain visibility into it, to manage it, and to be able to monitor than all of these point-to-point connections. And what we believe is that the key to that is establishing, if you can just move to the next slide, please, an environment in which you have essentially an abstraction layer that sits between all of these different elements. And what this abstraction layer needs to do is it needs to be able to acquire traffic from all of the sources that are generating it on the network. So whether they're IoT devices, whether they're legacy device or legacy mainframe systems, databases, whatever, doesn't matter. You've got to be able to acquire the traffic. You've got to be able to understand the traffic, and then you've got to be able to send it onto all of the tools or the endpoints that need to consume it. Next bill, please. You're having to work overtime for me today, Scott. Thank you. So as part of that process, you've got to be able to introspect all of the traffic that's moving across the network and really understand what's going on. So you've got to be able to understand, is this traffic originating from authorized sources, or is it originating from apps that are not authorized, shadow IT apps? Are there things on the network like BitTorrent or other peer-to-peer networking tools that might be exfiltrating software from the network? Is part of the bandwidth on the network being hijacked for crypto mining? All sorts of different things. So an understanding of the traffic is critical, both to detect these anomalous behaviors, these devices that shouldn't be there, and also to discover exactly what is on the network. One of the things that we see over and over again is that even in the best managed IT environments, probably 20 to 30% of the devices that appear on a network on sort of the first scan are a mystery to people. So the ability to discover the devices and to identify exactly what they are, which could be either just a straightforward discovery process, or it might be you've got to figure out what the behavior of the device is consistent with, and then sort of kind of work back from the behavior to figure out what the device is. But that discovery process is essential. Next bill, please. Okay, and when you've got that in place, you've really got what you need in place to do the monitoring of the IT infrastructure, to make sure that what you're doing is compliant, both with internal service level objectives, but also externally with the various regulations that apply to us, whether they apply to all of us in terms of personal identifiable information, whether it's just good practice like masking Social Security, or whether it's industry-specific regulations and compliance. And the other big thing, particularly in the context of today's discussion about optimizing and monitoring, is the ability to, as this slide unfortunately says, troubleshoot. I need to go back and fix that one. But the issue of troubleshooting across a multi-cloud network is a very, very complex issue. And it's complex because every one of those cloud platforms has its own monitoring capability. And very few have the ability to actually monitor across multiple cloud environments. And this has given rise to organizations using third-party tools like observability tools to try and get to that. But those tools are typically monitoring at what we call the melt level, so looking at the metrics, the events, the logs, the traces, but they don't necessarily have visibility down to the network traffic. So this is one of the areas where Gigamon really comes into its own, and we'll talk about that now in the next couple of slides. So next slide, thanks, great. So we have what we call a deep observability pipeline. So this takes the concept of observability, which we think is a great concept, that you should have the ability to see and to dashboard everything within the organization. But what we do that's different is that we take the observability information, which is typically drawn from, as I said, the metrics, the events, the logs, the traces that get built into applications. And we combine that with network intelligence. So we combine that with the ability to see, if you need to, all of the raw packets or the data flows or the metadata that can be extracted from that. We see all of that, we can combine it with the melt information, and pulling those two together really does give you this deep observability, this sort of absolute surety that you are seeing everything that's on the network. And that, we believe, is the basis of effective monitoring within an IT environment. And it also gives you the ability to optimize. So when we talk about the deep observability pipeline, we kind of talk about this triad, so moving from any workload to any tool across any environment. And within the pipeline, what we do is when we actually have access to that data, we can understand the data. So we introspect the data, we understand where has this come from, where is it going to, is it going to multiple tools? If it's going to multiple tools, what do those tools need to see? Do they need to see raw packets? Do they need to see sampled data? Do they need to see the header and not the payload, what we call slicing? Do they need metadata? If it's metadata, what form is that going to be delivered in? So you need the ability to figure all that stuff out. You also need the ability to look at the data and say, is this encrypted? And if it is encrypted, you need to do the decryption, again, the inspection of the decrypted payloads, understand where they need to go. If stuff it shouldn't be going to the endpoint it's requesting, to quarantine it, and then to re-encrypt and send it on to the endpoint. So we handle all of those things in this kind of, sort of middle part of this pipeline, the brokering and transformation. And then we handle the analysis. So analysis obviously happens on data in many, many different ways. Most organizations have got dozens of different tools that are analyzing the network traffic, they're analyzing the security issues that they're facing, and we empower those tools. We also have some analytic capability ourselves. We have a great tool called Threat Insight, which is our NDR tool, and that can also provide very, very effective analysis on what's going on the organization, within the organization, identifying anomalous behavior, responding to that, and then helping organizations remediate that so that they don't just fix a problem once, they fix the problem, harden their overall infrastructure as a result of the learnings from that problem. Okay, so next slide, please. All right, so that is what we call the deep observability pipeline. For those of you familiar with Gigamon, the deep observability pipeline is basically a term that we use for our entire stack. So the stack of products that go to make up the pipeline include all of the tapping, all the taps that you need. So most people who know Gigamon know us as a company who sort of grew up doing the sort of tap and ag of network traffic, and that is true. It was certainly true in our early days, but now we've really moved on from that. So we have the ability to tap all physical and virtual traffic, and above that, we have the ability to layer on our intelligence. So we have traffic intelligence that lets us identify, for example, duplicate packets on the network and make sure that tools aren't being choked by those duplicates. It lets us use the techniques I mentioned for things like slicing, for sampling, for net flow generation, or routing traffic from a specific IP address to a specific destination in the most effective way possible. So we have all of that capability, and we have our application intelligence tools as well. So these do things like very advanced visualization of exactly what is on the network, what applications are running, what traffic they're generating, and to identify the top talkers and also the associated analytics that go with that. We then have the capability, when we've seen that traffic, to say, you know, not all of this traffic needs to go through my entire tool stack. There's some traffic here that I can safely say is low risk. For instance, if you're seeing streaming traffic on the network from Spotify or from ESPN, that is low-risk traffic. It's extremely unlikely that anyone has hacked into that traffic stream and is embedding malware or something in those streams. So you can say, once I've identified this traffic as coming from this trusted source, I don't need to route it through my entire stack of tools. So we've got this capability there, and just that one facility alone, application filtering intelligence, often reduces traffic going to tools by 50%. And also the deduplication facility I mentioned that I talked about also on average reduces traffic being sent to tools by 50%. Because when you do have these complex networks and you're tapping in multiple places, you are going to see the same traffic in 2 or 3 different spots. So no matter how well-intentioned you are and how meticulous you are in your planning, you are going to get duplicate traffic. So these tools can help address that. So that's our GigaSmart layer. And then above that, we have the Gigaview Fabric Manager. And what the Fabric Manager does is it gives you the visualization across the whole of the network. So you can see all of the servers, whether they're in data centers, whether they're in the cloud, whether they're in virtual environments. You can see all of that. You can see the tools that you've got. You can see the traffic moving across the network. And if you want, for example, to bring a new tool into the Fabric, you just get that tool on the network, and then you can very simply drag and drop the traffic that you want from the particular source to that tool in a very, very straightforward graphical interface. So these are some of the capabilities that we've got. Let's now move on. Next slide, please. And let's talk about what folks are doing. So we're going to talk about some of the most common use cases that we see right now. Okay, so next slide. All right, great. And one additional advance.
Okay.
Thanks. So the primary thing that we see when we talk about optimizing and monitoring is organizations really struggling with gaining visibility and consistency across this complex infrastructure. And why are they doing that? Or why are they finding that a problem? So the issue I kind of referenced a little earlier on, every cloud, every environment has its own monitoring tools. They are designed to work and to work well within that one environment, but they're typically not designed to work across multiple environments. You know, it's obviously not in AWS's interests to have tools that introspect or manage, for example, the Oracle cloud. So these tools, as good as they are, don't provide the full visibility that you need. And the last thing that you really need to be doing from the sort of the monitoring side is to be having to aggregate feeds from all these different monitoring tools into some kind of supervisory environment that's giving you the visibility that you need. So some organizations, many organizations really, have turned to observability software. So observability software, as most of you are going to know, is software where you can actually embed in applications as you're developing them what you need to see out of the application to make sure that it's performing at the highest possible level, to make sure users are getting the experience that they need. So this is where the idea I mentioned before of MELT, metrics, events, logs, traces, comes in. So that's really what the observability tools excel at. But as I mentioned earlier on, they don't typically see down to the network level. They don't know exactly what's happening in terms of packets, of flows, of data moving across the network. So many times, particularly in security-oriented use cases, you need to see that information. So that's one of the critical things. So that brings us to the next point, security and compliance. So as you move into this complex environment, you've got a lot of choices to make when it comes to security. One is, do you just take the security tools in a particular stack and take your security model and implement those within that tool set? So that can work, but as you get more and more different types of environments, that gets very complex. You know, you're basically reinventing the wheel over and over again in the native tools that that environment supports. What we're seeing with many of our customers is that they're saying, well, hang on, we don't need to do that. We can actually use Gigamon to do that for us because it provides this layer, this abstraction layer that sees all the traffic, that supports all of the tools. And that can help them implement a consistent security and compliance model that leverages all the investment they've made, whether it's in tools, whether it's in training, whether it's in processes. It helps them leverage that on all these different cloud platforms that are coming into their own. So that's a major use case that we're seeing that's driving a lot of our business in the cloud. We can advance to the final point here, please. Okay. And the net of a lot of this is when you're using an abstraction fabric and you are doing taking a single feed and then sharing the data from that feed across many, many different tools. When you're using, particularly in a cloud environment, a tool like Gigamon that eliminates the need for agents for all of those tools, you're eliminating a lot of compute cycles that are going into supporting mirroring or tunneling processes to get that data out. You're also, because we can optimize all this traffic, reducing the volume of traffic moving across the network. So you're helping optimize bandwidth. And you're also reducing data movement charges because, again, a lot of this traffic may actually move off of a cloud to another cloud, might move back to on-premises, and making sure that you're not sending a lot of information that's never going to be used when it gets to that destination is critical to reducing data movement charges. So there's a lot we can do to manage the cost and complexity of these multi-cloud networks. Okay, let me just ask for one more advance here, and then we'll talk about a real example. So one of the Gigamon customers that's probably touched most of the people listening and all of the people in North America who participated in the 2020 census is that we were the tool that was chosen to provide the visibility into that system. So as you can imagine, that was a very complex system. It was specified to a very high level. The specification for that system was it had to support 600,000 concurrent users. And these were users accessing the survey forms from mobile devices, from laptops, from a variety of different environments. So it was 600,000 very, very varied endpoint, or up to 600,000 very varied endpoints. And that ran on a network of thousands of different computers running across multiple cloud environments. And for all of that data, the census needed to ensure that everything was encrypted, and then they needed a service to provide the decryption. They needed to make sure that they were as armed as possible against intrusion detection, and they had to make sure that no data was lost. So those were sort of the key security things that they were looking for. So we worked with an organization called T-Rex, who were a technical integrator. They were working for the overall sort of general contractor on the project. And we worked with them to build a system that scaled to that level, that provided visibility across all the different clouds, and made sure that all of the data was decrypted in the most efficient time factor, that we could do the deep packet inspection on the decrypted data and understand that it was safe before it was passed on to the applications that were going to process it. We also had to support a mix of different tools. I don't know exactly how many tools there were, but there were dozens of tools on this network. So that included passive IDS, it included data loss, and had full packet capture and replay to support what a lot of the analytic and forensic tools needed to do. So very high profile, very challenging project, but one that was very satisfactorily accomplished using Gigamon. So we can have the last slide, please, Scott. Okay, so this slide builds. You can sort of build out as quick as you want here. Okay, so just to summarize. So the deep observability pipeline gives you this fast, precise detection of security and performance issues across the network that we've described today. It provides packet-level visibility to all your existing on-prem tools and cloud-based tools, so we can route traffic to either. We can optimize that traffic flow using the functions built into our Fabric Manager and the GigaSmart functions I mentioned, like deduplication. We provide full visibility into east-west. So for those of you bothered about security, and obviously we're all bothered about security, this is a critical issue. It's not just the traffic moving on and off the network, it's the traffic moving across the network. Is traffic that's trying to access a new server, a new endpoint of any kind, is it supposed to be doing that? How do you catch that traffic, and how do you actually handle it if you see those types of issues developing? The fourth bullet here is that we enable on-premises and cloud tools to coexist. So we can feed cloud traffic to on-premises tools, on-premise traffic to cloud tools in whatever mix you need. And that's important because most organizations have got a lot of investment in their on-prem tools. Not just dollar investment, but knowledge investment, training investment. So enabling those to be used with cloud data extends the usefulness of those tools and enables people to migrate, for example, their compliance posture from on-prem into the cloud world. And then finally, the last bullet, and it really does go to the heart of today's topic around monitoring, is Fabric Manager, Gigaview Fabric Manager, gives you a consistent view of all of the environments that you're trying to manage. Okay, so that is my presentation for today. I'm going to take a swig of coffee here because I'm getting a bit dry.
Yeah.
And ask if we've got any questions.
Yeah, fantastic. So let me just put up the poll question here while we check out the questions that we have. So this is just the standard poll about additional information that you'd like about the Gigamon solution. So we'll just leave that up during the Q&A here. So Martin, I think the first question I've got for you here is from Bernie, who's wondering, do you report all this monitoring to your own console, or do we have to have our own? So I guess I'd broaden that, or do you integrate with other consoles, or how does that work?
Yeah, we do. So our objective is to be agnostic to the third-party tools, including the consoles and the different display mechanisms that people have. So Gigaview Fabric Manager obviously has its own console environment, but it's not really monitoring down to the level that most people would need to. So integrating with console, OpenView, whatever, that gives you that view into exactly what's happening in terms of flows between applications, between different geographic instances, everything. That's something that you need. I mean, we work at the traffic level, so it really isn't at the sort of the higher level that most people are going to want to sort of start their monitoring at. We really are a support layer to that.
Okay, great. Next question comes from Larry, who is noting that the Gigamon looks pretty smart. One thing that always handicaps us is that we have all these great tools, but not enough time to go through all the data. Does Gigamon have a service that can comb through everything and only send us critical alerts? And I guess I would add to that, are there best practices for stripping this data?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, there's two really good ideas that you just mentioned there. So I mean, the first is the sort of the best practice side of things. So understanding from all the traffic within the network what you really need to look at, and making sure you're focusing your efforts on that. So we do have the capability to go through and identify false positives. So because we understand not just the traffic, but the behavior of that traffic, we can actually look at the traffic, and even if we see an apparently anomalous event, we can actually gather context on exactly what's happening around that and say, look, this one thing does look a bit odd, but in the context of everything else that's happening with this packet or the tools that it's trying to access, we think this is probably a very, very low risk issue. So we suggest that this is not something you waste time tracking down. So we can absolutely prioritize all of the alerts across a network and just have your network ops people, or in a security side of things, the SecOps analysts, look at those things that are highest risk. Because you're absolutely right, Larry, with your question. No one, doesn't matter who you are, no one can look at all of the alerts, all of the network events that are happening. You have to prioritize, and certainly that's something that we can help you do.
All right, tremendous. And Martin, it looks like we're running out of time. There are some more questions there in the console. If you've got any time to stick around and
be happy to
text chat
sure.
with people, that's awesome. But if anybody wants to get started with Gigamon or find out more, what do you recommend?
So there's a couple of things. I mean, obviously there's a ton of information on the website. If you really want to get hands-on, there are test drives on the website where you can actually go and either download software to try it, or you can see sort of a virtualization of what it's like to run it. So those are options, and we're always happy to talk to people, get our systems engineers working with you to understand particular challenges that you may have and see where we can help. Yeah, so please visit the website, and that's the start of your process with us.
Okay. Well, Martin, thanks for your patience with my my suboptimal, less than
okay.
smooth, moving of your PowerPoint deck. But and seriously, thank you for a great update on Gigamon and bringing us up to speed.
Great.
Really
I'll get on to the questions and answers right now. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. And now it's time for our next presentation in the EcoCast, and our next session comes from NetApp. And I'm delighted to be here with Jeff Dickey, Chief Technologist for Cloud and Data Services. Jeff, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much. It's great to be here. So, hi everyone. I'm Jeff Dickey. I've been at NetApp for just about 3 years. I'm part of the Office of the CTO in our Public Cloud Service Division. I get to do really cool things like look for new technologies, acquisition targets, work with our biggest companies and help them with cloud strategies and our partners as well. So I get to see a lot of different things in the world, especially around new and innovative things and lots of migrations. So let's just get right into this. So IDC says we're now entering the next phase of cloud adoption, where enterprise applications are moving to the cloud and IT organizations need to handle multi-layer applications in complex multi-cloud operations, as well as dynamic cloud native applications on the same platform. And I'll talk today about how we address that. NetApp is the leader in block and file storage per Gartner and IDC. NetApp's focus on the cloud began early last decade when we partnered with AWS to help drive hybrid cloud services. NetApp is here to take enterprise grade to enterprise great by helping you meet more cloud mandates for hybrid and cloud native workloads with fully managed file services or self-directed storage services, delivering the freedom to run Linux, Windows, any of these applications natively across the hybrid, the clouds without having to redesign your code, your processes, or your teams. AWS has helped customers migrate their workloads for about 13 years. NetApp has partnered with AWS for the past decade, quite a while. And our partnership began in 2012 at reInvent. And along this journey, NetApp launched one of the first SaaS offerings on AWS Marketplace. Less than a year later, the ONTAP operating system was ported to AWS to provide customers the choice of on-prem, cloud, or both. And we continue to invest in developing true hybrid, best-of-breed technology stacks, proven especially with the acquisitions of Talon, which gives NetApp the kind of remote office and branch office consolidation to cloud capabilities, along with the acquisition of CloudJumper, which is our Spot PC offering for virtual desktops in the cloud. And NetApp and AWS just recently launched a native, fully managed service called Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP. And our partnership with AWS brings the flexible hybrid cloud storage solutions that help meet these business objectives in this very rapidly changing technology world, right? Whether you're consolidating into cloud or expanding your data protection or extending your application workloads to the cloud, optimizing what you have currently in the cloud, we're here to help you accelerate that innovation, the time to market, and be the cloud on-ramp for you. And because of these amazing innovations we've been able to bring to market, we were awarded Design Partner of the Year from AWS, which is a huge award. Very exciting. So where are we a good fit? So we're used by many of the top 10 companies in every single vertical out there. So we're going to be an ideal fit if you're in one of these businesses, if you're in healthcare, if you're high tech, defense, telco, oil and gas, you name it. We have most of those companies running our cloud services. We're also going to be a ideal fit for every type of cloud workload, whether that's your big, bad SAP HANA large databases or lightweight containers, custom apps, infrastructure as code. Talked about virtual desktops in the cloud. We've got you covered for everything from super ultra high performance, which is hard to do in cloud, and we're able to do that, all the way to adding value around high availability with native cross-region replication. Gartner has made the point, going so far as to state in a recent report that cost optimization will drive cloud adoption, and in their 4 trends impacting cloud adoption, and we really think that aligns with what we're doing with our cloud portfolio and cloud platform. And it's something that we see whether you've been in cloud for many years or you're just getting started, providing that place for continuous optimization. We recently asked our AWS customers about the challenges they face with workloads in the cloud. And what they told us really confirmed what we already knew, which is companies across all industries are leveraging cloud to drive their business growth and the innovation. But despite this fast cloud adoption, the most traditional enterprise applications still run on-prem. Depending on who you talk to, we still have 65 to 75% of these big workloads on-prem. And in order to migrate those traditional applications to cloud, organizations need to modernize the applications or acquire new knowledge and update these policies. And this makes this cloud journey very slow, expensive, and complex, and leaves you always behind. So there's an opportunity here. You can get the freedom to run traditional and cloud-native applications anywhere and move them across the hybrid multi-cloud without having to redesign your applications and the process that you're using, especially your teams. So you get to harness cloud advantage. The advantage is quicker at a lower cost, and get peace of mind knowing that your data is always available, secure, and compliant, backed by 30 plus years of storage innovation from NetApp. So you're going to get cost savings by up to 90% with automatic data tiering, which is that optimization of moving cold data to object storage based on the usage patterns. We're going to be able to optimize infrastructure costs with guaranteed SLAs for durability and availability, and choose the performance level that best suits an application requirements and adjust on the fly without having to move data. And that's something you could do manually, or that's something that could be programmatic to change service levels of storage. Something that's never been done before. I mean, can you imagine just saying, oh, I only need 1,000 IOPS today, but I might need several 100,000 of IOPS the next day without having to do anything. And no need to add extra headcount because we're offering these services as fully managed and SaaS offerings, so that you can have high performance, scalable storage without having to retool, relearn. Great for workloads, high performance workloads like machine learning, HPC, video rendering, financial simulations, you name it. We offer a seamless data migration path for these large data sets and databases from multiple sources into cloud and AWS with NetApp SnapMirror replication, and for third-party storage devices as well, even non-NetApp devices. We can do that with our SaaS service called NetApp Cloud Sync. You can use integrated snapshot copies to improve application availability with easy replication for backup, DR, and instant copies to satisfy and simplify the application test dev, and accelerate time to value, and reduce that TTM from months and weeks to hours and minutes. So every day, data migrations are started as companies move from on-prem applications to cloud-based storage and applications to keep pace with the world's economy. Gartner recommends disentangling data and applications as a means of overcoming this data gravity. With over 30 years of trust in the data center, NetApp addresses the data gravity concern by delivering the first and only environment truly enabled for hybrid cloud. and natively integrated across the public clouds, including first-party services. NetApp has always been the kind of analyst-proclaimed market leader of choice to serve enterprises and their most intensive workloads, from those production-level workloads that require the high, resilient and performant-tuned and that unified data experience, from hybrid cloud to on-prem, all the way to using AWS Outposts as well. We can take aging third-party data appliances from on-prem to AWS, and we also have a solution when you're on AWS and you need a local area for latency. We're able to do that as well. We have optimized data services for those enterprise apps, these really hard to move. I usually call it the kind of the last mile of cloud, getting these big databases like SAP and the FinServ, HPC, the big file shares, and we can get those into cloud native data volumes and offer persistent storage for containers and offer data protection around that for fast recovery and enterprise data protection in the cloud. From the public cloud to the data center, full stack visibility of infrastructure and applications can end up being disjointed and really unmanageable and complex. There's a need to identify performance issues faster than ever and optimize the usage so that you can defer spend or do more with limited budgets, or let's say detect ransomware before it's too late. And again, this world is very complex, and so a lot of things can happen without this deep insights, right? So the average cost of IT downtime is $5,600 per minute. And cloud waste is the #1 IT concern for the 4th year in a row. Cloud Insights from NetApp is what modern enterprises use to optimize not just storage in the cloud, but also optimize compute workloads and even complex Kubernetes deployments in any cloud. These enterprises depend on that hybrid shared infrastructure that is both on-prem in the cloud and detecting what's going on in the relationships in shared infrastructure is extremely important. But not just that, being able to have recommendations on what to do in this shared environment is extremely important. So you're not troubleshooting. You're being told what's going on, where the bullies, who the bullies are, and who's being affected. Hybrid's the new normal. And this shared tooling is necessary to optimize costs and optimize skills as well. So you're not burdening everyone with too many tools and too many alerts and having to remedy so many things at once. So you need something that's dynamically scalable, a SaaS solution that can connect to any cloud and on-prem and meets the needs of not just where you're going, but also where you are now and be with you for where you're going. So you don't need any special skills to get up and going. A lot of the things that happen in Cloud Insights is dynamically creating relationships between infrastructure, applications, and data, and the network. It's going to create that for you, so you don't really have to be an expert. You're just going to reap the benefits of understanding what's going on and how to fix anything that's happening and to know what could be happening in the future. And we do data protection and visualization a little bit different. So what we're doing is we're going to detect user anomalies, and we're going to identify end user accounts that may be victims of ransomware attack before it grows. We're going to be able to use and our F policy functionality and block out accounts identified as threats. And we're going to be able to look at storage performance, set alerts for data growth, efficiencies, loss, snapshot reserves, and identify possible infections. So, and we also integrate with leading virus protection software as well. So we can do file extension screening, which is becoming extremely important as everyone especially our users, are consuming cloud in different areas. And we're able to block files with known malicious file extensions or whitelist only approved file extensions. And we have that deep audit logging with intelligent F policy, with our zero trust engine. This is how we're going to protect data. We're going to be able to dramatically reduce those backup and DR windows to be able to see what's going on. And we're going to be able to really show you what's going on in every single environment across the board. We're also doing some very incredible things in the container and Kubernetes space. That's really it's exciting if you're in that if you're working with containers and Kubernetes. I highly recommend checking this out and looking how deep we can see what's going on in the pods, what is affecting what inside those complex environments, and be able to drill down in this kind of beautiful GUI and to see what's going on. So Cloud Insights is a little bit different. There's three major differentiators for Cloud Insights. First, we can scale as your infrastructure grows, both on-prem and in the cloud, and this gives kind of that singular way to monitor during cloud migrations, which is extremely important, right? If you don't know what you have now and you haven't been looking at that, this is a great opportunity to begin looking at all of the relationships between everything before cloud migration, and then having that historical data as things move and change in the cloud to look back at and to see what has been different. Second, we do provide that normalized data model to visualize the end-to-end infrastructure and those applications connected to it, which makes finding these complex problems much faster than any alternative ways. And because we know the relationships of the resources, we know how they are interconnected and used. So it means we can find that unused, wasted resources and help you begin optimizing with real data. We also go further than monitoring and visibility with deep security insights and automated actions. So with Cloud Secure, we take this trust no one approach, where we can actually inspect and analyze all data access activity in real time. We can detect that malicious behavior, identify potential policy risks, detect ransomware attacks before it's too late, and really minimize the impact of those types of attacks with those automated data backups. So it's really interesting because instead of being alerted that this could be a suspicious activity and attack, and you have to go figure out what's going on, what we're doing is we're automatically, proactively taking snapshots of those immediately when we see an anomaly, so that you're protected. And because we use worm technology, which is really perfect for something like a ransomware attack, your data is available and secure, and you're not going to be held hostage. So we're able to collect user data from Active Directory and LDAP servers, to help with figuring out different user activity and is this user, this is weird, this user doesn't normally download 20 terabytes of data, what's going on, and we're going to protect that data. Automation and cost optimization is one of the key components to cloud maturity. It's often thought of as the most essential part of maturity in cloud, because you really never stop optimizing when you're leveraging cloud and when you're in cloud. And NetApp is really it's been known for the best solution for enterprise applications, but we'll talk a little bit about cloud native applications. And we have a host of SaaS-based services to meet your needs, whether you're just getting started with containerized applications in Kubernetes, or you've been running Kubernetes at scale for years. So we recently acquired a company called Spot. which is now integrated and has the ability to reduce your cloud spend by up to 90%. So we help you build the cloud infrastructure that automatically adapts to your application needs. With Spot by NetApp, you can run EC2 Spot instances for your containers and microservices, and be able to reap the benefits of saving 90% on infrastructure costs, because we can intelligently place instances on Spot resources, and we have the machine learning and that information to know, to protect that from being the Spot instance be pulled away. So there's a few things in the portfolio. Elastic Group is really the product that started the company. It's what Spot's really well known for. And think of Elastic Group as an auto-scaling group for managing applications across Spot instances, complete hands-off autoscaler. For containers and microservices that are self-contained, we have Ocean by Spot, which is a really, really hot product right now. It's specifically designed for containerized workloads and for any applications running on ECS or Kubernetes anywhere. It's basically, think of this as a Kubernetes autoscaler, going both up, scaling up and scaling down. For cloud apps that run as stateful workloads that typically require data and IP persistence with automated solutions, or even in the event of a Spot instance replacement, your workload will immediately restart in the desired availability zone from the same exact data point, maintaining root and data volumes, as well as private and public IPs. Everything is all taken care of for you. We also offer Eco for managing reserved instances and savings plans. Again, another big cost savings. And we've also recently launched a service for managing, deploying, scaling Spark. Again, hands-off approach to just being able to leverage Spark and giving you that high confidence for those deployments and reliabilities, eliminate the overhead of release management, giving you that end-to-end visibility and management. And soon we're launching a continuous delivery service that ties in with Ocean. It's really exciting. Since Kubernetes is now the operating system of the cloud, if you run Kubernetes, you want to run it on Spot Ocean. Ocean, it simplifies that infrastructure management. Think of Ocean as this serverless infrastructure engine for auto-scaling containers up and down. And one of the biggest issues we have in the world of Kubernetes is when you scale up, that's great, but when you scale back down, it doesn't do very great bin packing. Every time you scale up, you're never scaling fully back, so you're always kind of growing. But we're able to completely reduce that by using kind of like Tetris and doing really tight and efficient bin packing. So you're going to get this robust container-driven infrastructure with auto-scaling, intelligent right-sizing for those container resources. So you can really set it and forget it and just develop and push your code into these environments. So you're going to be able to predict and automatically manage these application resources. And the beauty of the Spot products, and especially Ocean here, is you're only charged on the percentage of savings, right? So there's really no risk at all to begin using any of these products. So the beauty of cloud is we can do so much more than we've been able to do in the past, but with this flexibility brings amazing amounts of complexity. So we need to push off as much as we can to SaaS services. The real value of Ocean is letting you step away from managing Kubernetes and reaping the benefits of up to 90% cost savings. We've got some major, some big companies that, because they're getting so much savings using Ocean, they've got a mandate that everything, all new development, is microservices running in Kubernetes. They're moving as much as they can into Ocean so that they can spend less and use that money to help out innovate their competition, do more projects, hire more people, and you're not limited at all. So you can wherever you want to use Kubernetes, you want to do it yourself. ECS, EKS, GKE, AKS. That's all going to be up for grabs. Anything you want to do on that side. So you can get started today by using Spot Ocean Insights to see what savings you can get immediately. You simply connect to your Kubernetes cluster to perform the analysis on your cloud costs and resource utilization. And then before spinning up, a single instance, you'll see the full impact of Ocean for managing, scaling, and provisioning your container infrastructure in AWS. So it's a kind of a nice way to, you don't want to make any changes to your environment. Great, just start looking at this, start seeing those potential savings. And what's nice too is we basically kind of do that import for you. So there's no work to be done on your side to actually use Ocean. So it's pretty easy to get started. So I've talked about a few ways NetApp's cloud platform helps you innovate faster and provides incredibly valuable insights across your entire hybrid cloud. Here's a link to get started with a free trial of Cloud Insights on AWS and begin looking at your current infrastructure, whether that's on-prem or in any cloud.
Okay, super. Thanks, Jeff. That was great. Kubernetes is the operating system of the cloud. I like that, and you guys obviously have a lot going on with Kubernetes. Also, congratulations on that AWS Partner Award. Those are tough to get.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm just going to put the poll question up here while we get into some of the questions here. But the first one is, can I use NetApp to get my data to the cloud even if I don't have NetApp hardware on-prem?
Oh, yes, sure. Absolutely. We have a kind of a nice, efficient way to do that where you don't have to install anything in your environment. Everything is SaaS these days. So, and there's been a big mandate. All companies are mostly trying to say, hey, SaaS first. Anything we can't do SaaS, we'll figure out a different way. We have a SaaS service called Cloud Sync, and that's a way to connect those data sources and be able to. It's really a point-and-click UI too. Here's your data source. Authenticate it. Where do you want it to go? Do you want that to go into FSx for ONTAP? Do you want to go into Cloud Volumes? Do you want to go into S3? You get to choose that, and you can keep it in sync as well. So not only can you move your data, but you can also back up your data from wherever to wherever. If you're already in cloud, you can back it up to another cloud on a schedule.
Okay, yeah, sounds pretty easy and flexible. That's great. Next question here, clarification question about Spot. Is Cloud Insights the same as Spot?
No, they're very different. So Spot is basically handling everything as a service. Think of that as the platform that's providing that service for you. Cloud Insights is going to give you that single pane of glass to look at your entire infrastructure. You can look at what you're doing. You can absolutely look. Let's say you're using. You've got a huge Kubernetes footprint inside Ocean, and that's being managed. You can still use Cloud Insights to look at what's going on. But the great thing about Spot is you don't need to look at what's going on because they're doing all the magic behind the scenes to make sure you're not running out of disk space, you're not, you're constantly growing or you're releasing new pods. But they're very different, but are used together in most customer accounts.
Okay, great. We're here from Armand. He says, awesome PowerPoint, so thanks for that. Ransomware has been a recurring theme today. They're asking, how does NetApp protect me from ransomware?
Yes, we have a really interesting approach. Because we have a lot of experience with machine learning. We've collected so many petabytes of data, from kind of the phone home and looking at different things with our appliances. And because we do offer these storage services and first party services in the cloud, we have a lot of experience with really understanding what's going on and why. So we combine that those algorithms along with our storage. And so that's how we're able to say, hey, this is not something normal that's happened ever in your environment, or this is something that's that it looks like it's a unusual activity or a very common ransomware attempt. And instead of just sending an alert and saying, hey, you need to really check this out or lock something down or do this, we have the ability to programmatically snapshot that. So protect those data volumes that are under attack before the ransomware hits, so that your data is completely protected. And once we do those snapshots and we have worm on that, you can't write to those volumes. They're completely protected.
Okay, great. And I want to thank everybody who participated in the poll. Appreciate that. And I'll put up this your final slide there, Jeff, just because we're running out of time. And if somebody wants to get started with NetApp or find out more, you mentioned this link here. Anything else they can do to get started?
No, that's the best place to get going. Use that free trial. Start looking at your infrastructure. Yeah.
All right, tremendous. Well, thanks so much for coming on and bringing us up to speed on NetApp. And now it's time for our next presentation in the Optimization and Monitoring EcoCast. And our next session comes from Logs.io. And presenting for Logs.io is Charlie Klein, Senior Manager of Observability. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. And hey, everyone, thanks for staying on until the last session of the day, which will be about Logs.io. So my name is Charlie Klein. I do product marketing for our observability product lines. Let's take a quick look at our agenda for the next 20 minutes. I'll start the session by explaining exactly what Logs.io does and how we're different from all the other observability vendors out there. And afterwards, I'll show what it's like to onboard Logs.io. And then we'll jump into a demonstration of monitoring an application in the cloud and investigating the root cause of a production issue. And then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. Okay, so the first thing to know about Logs.io is that we are an observability vendor. So this means that our customers use Logs.io's platform to collect their log, metric, and trace data for analysis. And this analysis provides visibility into the health and performance of applications and infrastructure, and it shows what's causing any new problems as they arise. So without observability, you won't know, for example, if your billing service starts returning errors or if users can't log into your platform. Much less what's causing those problems. So log, metric, and trace data give you that visibility into production that you need, but of course there are hundreds of other vendors who do this. So let's see exactly how Logs.io is different. So Logs.io's SaaS platform is uniquely based on the best-of-breed open source technologies. So this means we're enhancing tools like the ELK stack for log analytics, Prometheus for metrics collection, to make observability faster, easier, and more cost-effective. So next, moving to the right, we really focus on helping customers remove all the noise that is so persistent in observability data. So this helps users concentrate on the high-quality data that matters most while reducing unnecessary costs, and I'll show you how that works in a moment. So moving to the right again, third is analytics. So we provide the search visualization, the data visualization, alerting capabilities that you would expect, but also some really unique machine learning that helps you surface the relevant data quickly. So to find the needle in the haystack, really. And so we use the real lived experiences of engineers to predict which data will matter most to you. And then lastly, over to the right, we simply just provide a level of support and partnership that you won't find at most other companies. Logs.io is always there to quickly help you overcome technical roadblocks, 24/7, no extra cost. We've invested so much in tech support because there's just a huge shortage of observability talent available out there. And so we help to close that gap. So that's a bit about how Logs.io is different. Now let's get to some what onboarding looks like with Logs.io. So in this slide, we're going to move from left to right to describe each step of Logs.io's onboarding. which helps customers unify, optimize, and organize all of their observability data for better cross-organizational observability. So starting on the left, the first step is to collect and unify your log, metric, and trace data on Logs.io's SaaS platform. So you can do this with open source data collection like Prometheus or OpenTelemetry. If you're already using these data collection technologies, you just need to add a small adjustment to your configuration to redirect that data to Logs.io. Or you could also use, if you don't have those collection technologies in place, they're easy to install. Another way to send data is with direct cloud integrations with AWS, Azure, and GCP to send data directly from your cloud services. So after sending the data, it'll all be ingested at any scale on Logs.io's SaaS platform, which is built on a true cloud-native architecture and automatically scales up and down with your data. So moving to the right, now that we have all that data in Logs.io, the second step is to begin optimizing that data with Logs.io Smart Optimizer. Smart Optimizer is a collection of capabilities aimed at eliminating all the noisy data and helping you reduce your storage costs. So Smart Optimizer includes machine learning and direct customer support assistance to help customers identify and filter out all the unneeded data. And you also have the ability to dynamically turn on and off the filters that are determining whether the data is making it into Logs.io or not. And for the data we do want to keep, we can use Logs.io Smart Tiering to reduce the data storage costs by moving aging data to more cost-efficient storage tiers. So as data ages, it usually becomes less valuable, so we help you reduce the storage costs of that data. All right, moving on to the third step. Now that we've narrowed down the data, we can segregate it across teams with Smart Organizer so that each team can focus on the data that matters most to them while ensuring that users can't access data that they're not supposed to access. So we do this by organizing our data across Logs.io sub-accounts and then using Logs.io's role-based access control to assign each user or team to the data that's relevant to them. So for example, if you have a development team focused on 3 different services, you can ensure that all the data from those 3 services makes it into one sub-account assigned to that team so that that team doesn't get distracted by data from other services. All right, so next is data analytics. So now that the data is all optimized and organized, every team can quickly search through smaller and more relevant volumes of data by focusing on their services, right? So step 2 and step 3 are pretty unique among Logs.io, and we do it so that ultimately we get lower costs and better data analysis because you just have less data to search through instead of being completely overwhelmed, which is so often the case with skyrocketing volumes of observability data. So I can talk more about our analysis capabilities, but it's much easier to show it, which brings us to our demonstration. So just a quick overview of the demo that I'll be showing. We're going to monitor an e-commerce application called the Sock Shop, which sells socks online. A couple of different use cases we'll look at. First is to proactively detect an application performance issue with 3 Logs.io alerts. Next, we're going to be validating that production issue is impacting the business. And we're going to determine the severity and the scope of that impact. And the third is that we're going to investigate the root cause of the problem by correlating across our log, metric, and trace data. So this is what our application looks like. It's running on Amazon EKS with a few Amazon ELBs, running technologies like Node.js, Go, MongoDB, Java, MySQL, a few others. And we'll be collecting data with open source data collection like FluentD for logs, Prometheus for metrics, OpenTelemetry for traces. This is already installed, so it's streaming data over to Logs.io as we speak. We just need to log into Logs.io to begin analyzing the data to monitor the application. I'm showing you microservices running on AWS because it's a common way to run applications, but just know that Logs.io can ingest data from any infrastructure, any application architecture. Okay, so let's get started with the demo. I'm going to share my screen. Just give me one moment. Okay. So like most incident investigations, we're going to start off in Slack. So we're starting off in our alerting channel. We see a new Logzo alert telling us that there are no new incoming orders, which obviously if our business depends on incoming orders, that's a big deal. So we're going to click on this Logzo alert, and that's going to bring us to the Logzo platform and show us the relevant visualization to the alert. Showing us the visualization that the alert was monitoring. Let me make this full screen. Okay. So in this visualization, we can see that our new orders are looking pretty good up until about right after 3:30. It plummets to 0. So obviously something is very wrong on our application. We need to figure out what's causing it. So let's zoom out to our larger dashboard. So here we can see we're monitoring all the services that we saw in that architecture slide. So on the left, we're monitoring the queries per second of our services, which looks at the successful responses versus the unsuccessful responses. And on the right, we're monitoring the latency for those same services. So looking at the front end, it looks like latency spiked to about 10 seconds right as the orders dropped off. So something's definitely up with the front end service. And it looks like successful responses plummeted at that same time. Scroll down a little bit, it looks like the catalog and cart service latency are both in the milliseconds, which is good, probably no problem there. Scroll down a little bit more, and we can see that our orders latency and payments latency both jumped at the exact same time to about 10 seconds, a long time in the world of the web. We can also see that our successful responses plummeted right as our unsuccessful responses, sorry, 400 and 500 errors, rose right at the same time. Scroll down further, it looks like shipping and user services latency are low, probably no problem there. So we know that there's probably something wrong with our payment, orders, and front-end services. And metrics are great for showing us that performance and health overview of all of our services and quickly figure out what's being impacted. But we still don't know what's causing that latency, what's causing the problem. And that's where we need a different kind of observability data. Specifically traces is what we want, because we want to break down a specific application request to understand and pinpoint the source of the latency. So I'm going to scroll up and click on a traces dashboard, which is going to correlate all the metrics we were just seeing with the associated traces so that we can dive in really quickly to the root cause of all the spiking latency we're seeing in our metrics. Okay, so as I scroll down here, we're going to see some data that's confirming what we already know. Payments, orders, front-end services are all spiking in average duration. They're also spiking with errors, right? These same services. We're in this dashboard because we want to find a specific trace, which are listed here. These are trace IDs. And let's click on the most recent one, which is going to bring us to a specific application request. And the trace is going to break down the application request by every operation completed by each microservice so that we can quickly see where the problem is. So here we can see the service and the operation that make up the application request. And these little bars indicate how long the operation took. So here it's taking no time at all, right? Like less than a millisecond in many cases. As the front end starts talking to the orders and the order service starts talking to the cart service, everything's executing in milliseconds. That's what we want to see. But as we get down here, we can see these operations took much longer to execute, about 7 seconds. So let's open up these, we call these spans. We'll open them up to see what's causing all the latency. There are errors, it's not surprising at all. And open up these logs to learn more about the operations. So here, for the authorized payment operation, we can see a really interesting exception message saying that the payment gateway is unavailable. It looks like there's a dev URL, which is not what we want to see in our production environment, right? So this is likely the cause of the spike in our metrics. The payment gateway is not available, so orders are not able to be placed. But we don't know that this is for sure impacting all of our application requests across the board. So now we're going to validate that this is whether or not this is indeed like the main cause of the drop in incoming orders. And to do that, we need our log data. So just like we correlated from our metrics to our traces, hit that button. It's going to correlate from our traces to our logs. And this is going to show us all of the times that we saw that the error message appeared, so that we can validate the severity of the problem. All right, so I'm going to filter in that error message by opening up this log and filtering in the error message right here. Now I'm going to get rid of this part of the query so that we're just left with this filter, which is the error message we want to search for. All right, so we saw this error message over 1,200 times, making it almost certainly the culprit of the spiking metrics, latency, and the drop in new orders. So that's 1,200 orders that weren't able to be placed because of this error. So we've done it, right? We've successfully troubleshooted the issue. Now we can alert the relevant developers and have them fix the problem. And that's how you correlate between your logs, metrics, and traces to dive into the root cause and validate the severity of a problem. Now, being the proactive SRE that I am, I want to create an alert to make sure that if this ever happens again, I'll be alerted immediately. So just by hitting that button, it's going to carry over the query. Once this loads here. Yeah, clearly having some Wi-Fi issues. Oh, there it goes. So you can see that the alert carried over the query from our log management search interface. So the alert will be monitoring this query of log data. So the alert will trigger if the amount of logs in this query is number of logs in, say, 5 minutes is over 0. We can schedule it so that we can shut off alerts during the weekend, for example. And we can determine a endpoint for alerts. We'll choose the same one that we were using earlier. Now I just hit save, and that'll save the alert so I'm notified if we ever see that payment gateway message again. So lastly, let's see what it looks like when the problem was resolved. I'll go back to our Slack channel here. So if we scroll down, zoom ahead in time a little bit, get another Logs.io alert that says the previous alert is now okay. So let's click on that link. It's going to bring us to Logs.io again. It's going to bring us to that same visualization we saw earlier to show us whether or not, so we can validate whether new orders are coming in again. And it looks like they are, which is great. So we can do some retrospect. We can look back and see our friend Tomer deployed version 0.4.4 of the payment service. Right after that, new orders plummeted to 0. This is how long it took to troubleshoot. We can see that our friend Asaf deployed the previous version of the payment service, 0.4.3. And after that happened, new orders started coming in again. And we knew to direct Asaf there because we knew the root cause of the problem, which is that payment gateway. And so that is how you troubleshoot with Logs.io. When you have your log, metrics, and trace data all together, it gives you that end-to-end observability you need to understand what's happening in your environment and why things are happening the way that they are. And that's what I want to show today. That is the demo and the a bit about Logs.io. And so now I can open it up for questions.
Okay, super. Yeah, and Charlie, if you can hit the end screen share in your
sure.
That'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, so great presentation, really cool demo there. And while we see what questions we have, let me put up the poll question, just about additional information that people would like about Logs.io. So the first one we've got here is, what are the best ways to send metric data to Logs.io?
Yeah, so there are a couple different ways to do that. If you're currently running Prometheus, and it's really easy. All you have to do is make some small adjustments to your Prometheus configuration files, and it'll automatically redirect that data to Logs.io for long-term storage and analysis. If you're not using Prometheus, you can either install Prometheus, which is not hard to do. It's a really straightforward collection technology. Or you could ship metrics from AWS CloudWatch, for example, or from Azure Monitor. So if you're using those tools as well, you can forward that metric data to Logs.io. But most people use Prometheus to collect their data and send it, or you can also use Telegraph, which is another popular open source metrics collection technology, and then send it over to Logs.io.
Okay, great. And I guess commenting on the demo, Warren says that it's nice to see that Logs.io can be accessed from a Mac. Let's see. Another question here. How can I get my log data parsed with Logs.io?
Yeah, so there are two ways to do it. The most common way is to ask our customer support team to do it for you. So parsing your log data is really important because it structures the unstructured data so that you can actually search fields and build visualization based on fields of the data. So most people do it just by asking our customer support team to do it for them. They can turn it around in like 20 minutes. They do it all the time. You can also use Logs.io's self-service log parser. If you know how to grok, you can build a grok pattern and apply it to your logs coming into Logs.io, and it'll parse your logs for you.
Okay. I have time for just a couple more here. Here's one from Fasun who's asking, how does Logs.io simplify DevOps analytics?
Yeah, so you can ingest data from across your entire DevOps tool chain. So a really common use case, Logs.io, is to ingest log metric insurance data from a CI/CD pipeline, for example, or from Kubernetes, whatever tool you're using. And from there, you can build dashboards to monitor that data, to monitor the health of the infrastructure that's powering your CI/CD pipeline, for example, or the actual like Jenkins builds, for example. You can monitor success rates. So it's really, the use cases are quite broad. You can collect data from any DevOps tool that you're using and begin monitoring that data on Logs.io.
Okay, great. Well, Charlie, it looks like we're running out of time, but if somebody wants to get started with Logs.io or find out more, what do you recommend?
Yeah, so the best way to do it is with a free trial. We have a free trial on our website. All you have to do is create an account. You don't have to install any Logs.io. You don't have to install anything with Logs.io except for whatever you're using for data collection on your end. And you send it over to Logs.io to your free trial, and you can begin monitoring. Or you can reach out and get a personal demo through our website.
Okay, tremendous. Well, Charlie, thanks for the update and for bringing us up to speed on Logs.io. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Okay, and now it's time for our final prize drawing of the day. The winner of the last of the $500 Amazon gift cards. And the winner is Christopher Bowen from Pennsylvania. So congratulations to Christopher, as well as our previous winners, Carrie Broderick and Marcia Johnson. We'll be in touch about claiming your prizes. So that wraps up our event for today. Before you go, I do want to mention our ransomware.org site. I can't recommend this site highly enough. It's a tremendous mix of basic, intermediate, and advanced information about ransomware, along with blogs that offer breaking analysis of recent ransomware incidents. Great site. They say every company is a software company these days. If you were attending this event and thinking your company's solutions would be a great fit to present a session in a future event like this, we'd love to hear from you. Just reach out at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank all of our presenters today for putting together such great presentations and demos and offering their insights in the Q&A portions. And I want to thank all of our participants for making this event possible. Turbonomic, Scale Computing, Rubrik, Gigamon, NetApp, and Logs.io. And of course, we'd like to thank all of you for attending today's EcoCast from Actual Tech Media and for all of your great questions. Finally, if you enjoyed today's event, tune in again next week, Tuesday, March 22nd at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. We've got a megacast coming up, Crafting a Transformed IT Blueprint, Storage Infrastructure, Cloud, DR, Security, Ops, and more. So it's basically everything that you need to worry about in IT. Real broad event with great sponsors like NetEnrich, Nebulon, Scale Computing, Rubrik, Okta, Red Hat, and NetApp. So we hope to see you all at a future event, maybe even next week. Thanks for attending today.